If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 81, Battle with Dumbledore. There are indeed two Dumbledores in this world. One is Albus Dumbledore, and the other is his brother, Aberforth Dumbledore. The name that appeared in the principal's office at this moment was indeed Albus Dumbledore, but the thing is, the one in front of him seemed to be Albus Dumbledore as well. Cyrus did not dare to act rashly. There was only one idea left in his mind. Did he find me? Or he isn't able to see me. Now he is wearing an invisibility cloak, which is one of the 3 deathly hallows. Even the god of death himself cannot see through this invisibility cloak. In the original book, when Harry was hiding in the invisibility cloak, even Voldemort did not notice him. Maybe Dumbledore didn't notice him after all? Cyrus held on to the last bit of luck in his heart. But he soon learned why people said Albus Dumbledore was the most powerful wizard in the world. Good evening, Tom. Or are you afraid to show your true face to see me now? I have a lot to talk about old times with you. In addition, I also want to ask you if there is something you have with you that should be there. Dumbledore's blue eyes behind his half-moon lenses were staring at him. Please forgive me. I promised 2 very energetic students to help them get some things back. Of course, there is also a cloak now. That was left to Harry by his father. I think it would be better to return it to him. What do you think, Tom? He looked very calm, as if he was not talking to a Dark Lord who had killed countless people, but to a student who had gone astray. Cyrus now clearly understood that he had been completely discovered. Although he was extremely flustered in his heart, on the surface he knew that he had to calm down. Dumbledore is not an omniscient god. The weaker he is now, the more powerful he needs to look. Only in this way can it be possible to frighten Dumbledore and find hope of escape. As for telling the truth to Dumbledore, Cyrus didn't expect him to believe Tom Riddle's lies. The moment Cyrus took off his cloak, Dumbledore's pupils immediately shrank. You look surprised? Did you never think that I would really come back to life? Cyrus raised the corners of his mouth with a teasing smile. You thought you had a chance to win, but you were wrong. Harry Potter and Ginny Weasley are dead at my hands. You could have stopped it, but you didn't. Dumbledore was silent. For almost a whole year, he did have too many opportunities to stop the trouble in advance, but he did not. The purpose was to test Harry Potter, hoping that he could grow up to have enough courage to fight against Voldemort. He knew that the child was carrying too much weight, so he must be allowed to grow. He did not expect. Before Dumbledore could feel self-blame, he realized something was wrong. According to the information he had, Harry should have entered the Chamber of Secrets not long ago. There was no chance of Harry and Tom Riddle meeting each other. How could Tom think that Harry was dead? Relying on that basilisk? But he left the Phoenix as a guarantee. The only possibility is that the other person is lying. Dumbledore was actually very familiar with the opponent's tactics. Tom in the past was also very good at using words to attack the opponent's heart and make them shake. Now he doesn't plan to continue communicating with Cyrus. For some people, no matter how much they talk, it is in vain. Dumbledore's wrist flicked suddenly, as if swinging a whip, and the air made a crisp sound that echoed in the shrieking shack. It was a golden spell. The light of the spell was more dazzling than the sun. When it shot towards Cyrus, it caused a huge cyclone and made the entire shack tremble. Cyrus's hair stood up in front of him, and he immediately conjured a silver shield. The magic spell hit the shield, and it immediately made a violent sound, like a gong or drum after being struck violently. Trembled, and then cracks appeared. Boom! The shield exploded. Cyrus was horrified to see that Dumbledore was really powerful beyond his imagination. On the other hand, there was also a reason why his magic power at this moment could not be compared with Voldemort in his heyday. You don't want my life, do you, Dumbledore? You don't bother to do such a cruel thing, right? Cyrus couldn't help but remind Dumbledore of his position at the moment, because for such a white person like Dumbledore, as far as Cyrus is concerned, even if the old bee really defeats him, he may not be able to kill him, right? Killing a person is cruel to them, but being imprisoned in Azkaban and being sentenced to death after due legal process becomes an act of justice. While Cyrus was fighting against Dumbledore, mainly passively resisting Dumbledore's attacks, he was thinking that at least Dumbledore's kindness gave him the last way out. But he didn't want to go to Azkaban. He cast several killing curses, but Dumbledore avoided them all. The green light fell on the wall of the shack, immediately leaving a scorched mark. Dumbledore glanced at the traces and pondered for a moment. He was a little surprised, not because the magic power of the death curse was too powerful, but actually on the contrary, the power of the magic curse was surprisingly small. It stands to reason that even if Tom Riddle's death curse hits a rock, it will break it immediately. Could it be said that Tom Riddle has no murderous intention? Dumbledore was almost frightened by the thought in his mind. If Tom Riddle didn't have murderous intentions, wouldn't it mean that Harry Potter would become the Dark Lord? He quickly forced himself to come to his senses, jerked his wand back, and waved it around like a whip. A thin and long flame burst out from the tip of the staff, and he suddenly seemed to turn into a cowboy, swinging the rope of the flame, intending to tie up Cyrus. Cyrus was also an expert at playing with fire, and he took away control of it. The fiery rope immediately turned into a big snake, puffing out its chest and bursting through the dilapidated hut. The fire immediately began to spread, and the big snake turned towards Dumbledore, making an angry hissing sound from its mouth. The snake reared up from the ground, ready to attack. At the same time, Cyrus's curse also pierced the wall of fire between the two of them and shot straight toward Dumbledore. Ha! Dumbledore immediately waved his wand widely, as if wrestling with a bull, and suddenly knocked down the big snake's head, blocking him from another incoming curse. Boom! The flame immediately bloomed and spread like a passionate flower. If anyone looks from the window of the room, he will immediately be attracted by the firelight here. Cyrus took advantage of Dumbledore's vision being obscured by the flames and used apparition without hesitation. His body immediately spun as if it had been washed into a sewer, but then returned to the same place. Do you think I won't set an anti-apparition spell here in advance, Tom? Dumbledore strolled among the flames, and the flames avoided him as if they had seen something terrifying. A charred road was paved under his feet. It's time you surrendered. Azkaban would be a good place for you. Ah, that would be a hassle. You see. I don't want to go to Azkaban at all, Dumbledore, Cyrus said calmly. Chapter 82, I'm not Tom. Ah, that would be a hassle. You see. I don't want to go to Azkaban at all, Dumbledore. Cyrus figured out Dumbledore's psychology, and he seemed to have great confidence at the moment. But it's no wonder that Cyrus's magic power at this moment is about the same as that of Voldemort when he just graduated and is far behind Dumbledore, who has the Elder Wand. This old man may have seen through his own strength the moment they fought. Now, taking advantage of Dumbledore's self-confidence may be the only possibility for him to escape. He simply stopped attacking and lowered his hands, which made Dumbledore couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. What tricks are you trying to do again, Tom? His tone was very frivolous, and the atmosphere between the two people was not at all as tense as before. It was as if he was not facing an enemy who planned to kill each other, but a naughty but naive and ignorant bad student. I just want to know. Cyrus took out the Marauder's map and rubbed his fingers on the empty parchment. This is indeed a very powerful magic item, isn't it? I solemnly swear that I'm up to no good. He picked up the wand and tapped it lightly on the parchment. Many words and pictures immediately appeared on the parchment. Dumbledore was attracted by his actions. His beautiful blue eyes were staring at the Marauder's map. He probably knew what the other party's doubts were. So, sometimes, we have to admit that young people always have more wonderful ideas and can do things that we cannot do. He said with a smile while seeing the magic of the map while passing the past troublemakers with a sense of longing. Just answer me one thing. Cyrus looked directly at Dumbledore. How did you manage to appear in the principal's office and in front of me at the same time? It's easy, Tom, you just need a little help. Dumbledore calmly took out a golden pendant from his robe. It was a ring-shaped thing with a small hourglass in the middle. Time turner. Now the truth is revealed. Dumbledore used a time turner so he could be in two places at the same time. As for how to accurately know which secret passage he would choose to leave through, I'm afraid it's not accidental. Dumbledore has the time and energy to try one by one. No matter which secret path Cyrus took tonight, this old man who is good at planning will appear in front of him. Cyrus felt suddenly desperate. How can people play like this? His current body is indeed very talented. Perhaps Dumbledore is modest, but the other party does admit that Voldemort's talent is greater than his own, and he also believes that Tom Riddle is the most talented student in the history of Hogwarts. But Cyrus is not Voldemort. He does not have the power of peak Voldemort, and he doesn't have the time either. And what about his opponent? Dumbledore, the greatest wizard in the world, possesses the invincible Elder Wand, controls the right time and place, and has a lot of spies everywhere in the castle, and now he holds the time turner. The strongest panel, the most sophisticated operation, and the unparalleled magical equipment. Cyrus didn't even know what he could do against Dumbledore. But he quickly calmed down. His eyes glanced at Dumbledore's feet, where a small snake, only as thick as a pencil and as long as a finger, was approaching Dumbledore. It was the basilisk. Cyrus made the basilisk take action when he picked up the Marauder's map. At that time, all of Dumbledore's attention was on his hand, and he did not see an inconspicuous little snake coming from Cyrus. Basilisk leapt under the wizard's robe. This is probably Cyrus's last chance. Even Dumbledore, as long as he is still human, can't resist the basilisk's magic. The little basilisk suddenly grew in size and swelled up, filling the entire room. Almost not a second was wasted. The moment it returned to its original form, 2 eyes bigger than the moon above its head were already looking at Dumbledore. The huge body of the basilisk suddenly blocked the line of sight between Cyrus and Dumbledore. Cyrus cast the flying spell without hesitation, turning into a plume of thick black smoke and flying towards the sky. He didn't care at all whether the basilisk had any effect on Dumbledore. In fact, the moment the basilisk appeared, Cyrus had already made the decision to sacrifice it. As long as it can be delayed for a little while, it has done its job. The moment Dumbledore saw the basilisk, he was extremely surprised. He thought Tom would leave the basilisk behind to deal with Harry, but he didn't expect that he would actually leave with the basilisk. In this way, the preparations he left for Harry, the phoenix, the sorting hat, would be useless. Thinking of this, he immediately closed his eyes and called the phoenix in his mind. A hot flame suddenly bloomed in front of the basilisk like a firework. The sharp claws of the phoenix protruding from the flames blinded the basilisk mercilessly. At the same time, Dumbledore stretched out his right hand holding the Elder Wand from a distance, holding it empty with his left hand, and his magic controlled Cyrus's body through the air. A simple floating spell, under his superb magic power, became the thread that trapped the kite. He grabbed Cyrus back from the sky in one fell swoop. Before Cyrus could fall to the ground in embarrassment, Dumbledore immediately added a restraining spell. Then, he made a rooster out of mud. The rooster immediately crowed in the process of being frightened. This crow made the blind basilisk completely crazy. It was festering all over, and the flesh and blood in its body seemed to be melting, turning into some kind of poisonous thick water that gave off a foul odor. However, its skeleton and snakeskin were well preserved. Green scales glowing with colorful light hung loosely on the winding snake bones, and disgusting thick water flowed from its empty eye sockets. Dumbledore avoided the foul smell and slowly walked up to Cyrus. "To be honest, Tom, you were a bit beyond my expectations tonight. I thought your strength would be stronger. It seems that you have only returned to the level you were in school," he said while taking it from Cyrus's arms. Out came a diary and a crown. Judging from today's competition, Cyrus's magic is at best only at the level of the House Masters of Hogwarts and may be comparable to Snape, who can use black magic at will. Of course, there are not many wizards who can reach this level, but compared with the strength of the Dark Lord more than 10 years ago, it is not worth mentioning. At least Dumbledore didn't expend much energy in subduing him. Cyrus was not worried or nervous at all now. Losing was normal. Who asked his opponent to be Dumbledore? The only person the Dark Lord feared. "Ha, I guess I have to tell you the truth as I really don't want to go to Azkaban. The thing is, I'm not Tom nor Voldemort either." Dumbledore's brows furrowed hearing this. "My real name is Cyrus and I'm not from this world." He didn't expect Dumbledore to believe that he was not Riddle himself. However, he was finally resurrected and gained a new life. How could he be willing to live inside Azkaban under someone else's name? Now, Dumbledore looks confused. Chapter 83, Dumbledore, you are dangerous for this world. My real name is Cyrus and I'm not from this world. Changing yourself a name will not change your situation. I have come to terms with your shameless lies, Tom Dumbledore said expressionlessly. He looked at the 2 objects in his hand at the moment, and it was obvious that from that traces of magic were detected in the crown. Although the diary also has magical power in it, it does not seem to be a Horcrux. There is no soul of Voldemort in it. It is more like an ordinary pensieve with no other dangers. It seems that you relied on this thing to resurrect? The crown has been missing for nearly 1,000 years. I guess the relics of the other 2 founders were also made into Horcruxes by you, right? He stood up and looked at the crown that had shown signs of time. It was almost impossible to repair this thing. He planned to destroy the crown later. As for the diary, he didn't intend to leave it to Cyrus. Soon, the Aurors will arrive and you will be escorted to Azkaban, but don't worry, none of us will kill you. I admit that just taking your life will not satisfy me. There are more ways to destroy someone. Dumbledore smirked sadistically. He waved his wand, trapping Cyrus tightly, took the wand away from his hand, then picked up the Marauder's map and took a look at it, then looked quietly at the sky. The flames had burned the shack completely, and now the moonlight was above their heads. You are thinking about it, right? Dumbledore looked back at Cyrus after hearing his words. You are thinking about my behavior, the way I treated your savior's group, and what I said just now, aren't you? Dumbledore came closer to him. What is it this time, Tom? Thinking you will fool me again? Nat, I'm thinking that you look doubtfully. Even if you were not thinking about all those things you are now. Cyrus calmly said, why don't you find out the answers to those questions? Why don't you use Legilimency and find out if I'm lying or not? Cyrus pursed his lips. I must admit, your proposal intrigues me. However, I cannot help but wonder if this is yet another ploy. Dumbledore pondered for a moment, weighing his options. It could also be Tom Riddle's last hidden card. What if using Legilimency on him is a trap? However, the opportunity to delve into Tom's mind and uncover the truth was too tempting to ignore. Very well, let's see what you claim to be is true or not, Mr. Cyrus. Cyrus nodded in acknowledgement. He released the occlumency barriers that shielded his mind, allowing Dumbledore access to his memories. As Dumbledore delved into Cyrus's mind, he was met with a flood of images, thoughts, and emotions. He navigated through the intricate web of memories, searching for any signs of deception or manipulation. Minutes passed in silence as Dumbledore delved deeper, his expression shifting from concentration to contemplation. Cyrus was looking at Dumbledore with an expectant gaze, his thoughts swirling with a mixture of apprehension and hope. Despite knowing that his magical prowess fell short of matching the peak Dark Lord, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that he could have landed a serious hit if he had the intention to kill and utilized his Philosopher's Stone heart, catching Dumbledore off guard with the surprise factor. He just wanted to be free after fleeing from Hogwarts, but after seeing Dumbledore inside the house he was heartbroken. Still, he wanted to escape the situation somehow. There was a slight 0.001% chance he would have harmed Dumbledore, but he isn't sure if he could kill him and doesn't want to antagonize the old bee. As he met Dumbledore's gaze, Cyrus silently hoped that the wise old wizard would see beyond the facade of Tom Riddle. Cyrus held on to that flicker of hope, praying silently that the great wizard would see that he was not a threat. Dumbledore suddenly had a face of realization, and then his beautiful blue eyes turned cold. Cyrus noticed a red system message flashing in front of him. Danger! An external party is trying to use mind-related magic to modify the host's memories. Wait, don't tell me he is. Cyrus looked at the notification, which only he could see in disbelief. Cyrus's disbelief quickly turned to shock and anger as he realized what Dumbledore was attempting. The White Wizard, whom he had hoped would see the truth in his words, had instead tried to manipulate his memories and even attempted to use the Imperious Curse on him. Other party is going to find out about the system. Taking measures. Boom! In a sudden surge of power, electricity crackled around Dumbledore's body, causing him to recoil. His attempt to tamper with Cyrus's mind had backfired, leaving him stunned and bloodied. As the shock from the system weakened the restraints Dumbledore had placed on Cyrus, he looked at the Elder Wizard. What the fuck was happening? With a grimace, Dumbledore wiped the blood from his mouth, his expression a mixture of surprise and curiosity. What was that? He muttered, his voice tinged with bewilderment. I could see your memories after your transmigration, but I couldn't access your previous world. Cyrus confronted Dumbledore. You tried to use the Imperious Curse on me? Even after seeing what I did and why I did all that? Ho, are we really asking that question, Mr. Cyrus? Because you are a great anomaly, he began, his voice solemn. I don't know how you managed to merge with Riddle's soul or what your motives are. Whatever you did till now tells me to believe that you are a good person, but who has seen the future? For years, I have nurtured and guided the growth of the plant called Harry Potter. You know how far I have gone and am willing to change that prophecy, right? My goal is to paint and turn Harry into the greatest savior in everyone's eyes. That's the future I can see. I can glance at your memories and I can predict that you know about some things a normal 16-year-old Riddle would not know. I cannot allow an anomaly like you to disrupt my carefully laid plans and disturb my vision. I was going to send you to Azkaban, but the pretext was that you were Tom. Dumbledore continued, but you truly are not from this world. I can sense an unknown power inside you that blocked me from looking at its roots. I cannot let an unknown otherworlder roam freely in this world, especially one whose power I cannot gauge. You are far too dangerous for the future of this world. And I was unable to use mind-related spells on you. Alas, what a pity. I am sorry Mr. Cyrus, but you need to die. Dumbledore said these words like he was talking about a mundane task. This made Cyrus's back sweat profusely. Chapter 84, I Still Want to Live. And I was unable to use mind-related spells on you. Alas, what a pity. I am sorry Mr. Cyrus, but you need to die. As Dumbledore spoke, Cyrus's heart sank. The realization that Dumbledore saw him as nothing more than a threat to his grand plans filled him with a sense of dread. Yes, reality is different than fiction, but don't think I'll go down without fighting back. He knew that he had to fight for his life, even if it meant facing off against one of the most powerful wizards in the world. With a flick of his wand, Cyrus sent a barrage of killing curses hurtling towards Dumbledore, each one aimed with deadly precision. But the elder wizard moved and dodged with ease. Oh, your curses are stronger than the previous time. Old B said while effortlessly dodging each curse with graceful movements of his elder wand that belied his age. Cyrus knew that using his Philosopher's Stone was the only way if he wanted to survive, although his stone was weaker and if he used it to do magic he could lessen his living years, he still decided to use it. He knew that he had to pull out all the stops if he wanted to stand a chance against Dumbledore. Fuck it. Ignoring the consequences, Cyrus reached deep within himself and tapped into the power of his Philosopher's Stone. Stomping his feet on the ground, Cyrus focused his will, channeling his magic into the earth beneath him. And in response to his command, a massive spike of earth erupted from the floor, just below where Dumbledore stood with unstoppable force. Caught off guard by the sudden attack, Dumbledore stumbled backward, his expression one of confusion and surprise. But even as he dodged the first spike, more followed in rapid succession, each one aimed in between his legs. For the first time since the battle began, Cyrus allowed himself a small smile. Seeing Dumbledore sweat as he frantically dodged the barrage of earth spikes gave him a glimmer of hope. It seemed that he might just have a chance to survive after all. I think I can distract him like this and then can escape, maybe a little bit more. But even as he pressed his advantage, Cyrus knew that he couldn't afford to let his guard down. Cyrus squinted his gaze and suddenly violet flowers with yellow spots bloomed on top of the spikes, and as Dumbledore looked at one of them, he saw that all the flowers twitched and started emitting a green-colored gas. Oh! Dumbledore's eyes widened with curiosity and intrigue as he witnessed the impressive display of magic unleashed by Cyrus. With a flick of his wand all the flowers died, becoming darker. Ho ho, what is this magic? Dumbledore exclaimed, his voice tinged with genuine fascination. Is this really the magic of the stone? He questioned, his eyes sparkling with interest. He took a step toward Cyrus. With a swift incantation, he cast the Diffindo spell, slicing through the earth spikes with effortless precision. The floor was flattened once again. The sudden destruction of his attack caught Cyrus off guard, and he hissed in frustration at the thwarted attempt. Despite his best efforts, it seemed that Dumbledore's skill and experience were more than a match. You are more dangerous, but because you have just acquired that power, it seems you aren't capable of handling it precisely and doing more things. With a flick of his wand, he cast the Expelliarmus spell and disarmed Cyrus' wand. The force of the spell also hit Cyrus, sending him flying backward. Ugh! This old fart! But Cyrus backflipped in the air and called his wand as his wand materialized in his hand. Without hesitation, Cyrus began shouting the killing curse like crazy. Avada Kedavra! Avada Kedavra! Avada Kedavra! Slash earth spikes, slash! Slash earth spikes, slash! Simultaneously conjuring spikes below Dumbledore. He didn't know anything else than to use the earth spikes, as he had never trained this alchemy power. Sensing the danger, Dumbledore quickly reacted. With a swift incantation, he cast a protective barrier around himself to deflect the curses. But Cyrus was relentless, his spells raining down upon Dumbledore with relentless intensity. With a silent incantation, Cyrus cast Nebulous, the fogging spell, shrouding the room in a dense mist using a lot of power from his core. The fog thickened around them, obscuring their surroundings, with Cyrus' eyes turning to red color with big horizontal pupils. Dumbledore wasted no time in responding. A wave of his wand, he conjured a powerful firestorm. Cyrus was not ideal either, as he quickly cast the Protego Diabolica. Firestorm clashed with Protego Diabolica. The intense heat of the fire began to dispel the thick fog, clearing the room of the obscuring mist. As the fog cleared, revealing the charred remains of the earth spikes and the scorch marks left by the flames, Dumbledore scanned the room, his keen eyes searching for any sign of his opponent. But to his surprise, Cyrus was nowhere to be seen. Dumbledore furrowed his brow, his blue eyes narrowing as he sensed a presence behind him. With a swift turn, he faced behind him, his wand at the ready. But what he saw caught him off guard. Ah! Dumbledore's heart skipped a beat as he locked eyes with the figure standing before him, the two different colored orbs gazing back at him with a mixture of familiarity and intensity. One eye was a deep, soul-piercing black, while the other gleamed with a haunting paleness. In that moment, Dumbledore felt as though time had come to a standstill. Memories of days long past flooded his mind, memories of a younger self and a love that had once consumed him entirely. Gellert! Dumbledore whispered, the name escaping his lips in a breathless whisper. But the figure before him, with its aged features and blonde hair, didn't move. Dumbledore calmed himself as his blue eyes regained their calmness. He looked at the figure, a perfect alive-looking statue of his friend, whose base was coming out of the earth spike. It seemed Cyrus had managed to fool the White Wizard in this moment. Dumbledore looked at his surroundings but then noticed a dark cloud floating in the sky from the big gap in the room's roof. It seems he managed to escape. Dumbledore muttered, still looking at the perfect statue of Gellert Grindelwald with an unscrutinized expression of sorrow and longing. Chapter 85, A Dim Moonlit Night. The black cloudy figure of Cyrus disappeared into the beautiful moonlight. Dumbledore stood for a while looking at the statue. He then took out the statue from the earth and placed it gently inside his storage bag and took out the map while remembering something. Shocking my old heart like this. I need to calm down. Dumbledore found that the Dumbledore on the Marauder's map had left the office and disappeared in a deserted place. He knew immediately that he had taken action, and now he could return to normal time to fill the void of the moment he disappeared. It seems that it's time to go, but I will remember you. Mr. Cyrus. The Weasley family anxiously paced back and forth in the headmaster's office. When they heard that their daughter had been taken away by the air, and now her life or death was uncertain, Molly and Arthur felt as if the sky was falling. Fortunately, Dumbledore came back in the end, but he didn't stay long before leaving again. The only thing that keeps them calm now is what Dumbledore said before, if nothing goes wrong, I believe that Miss Weasley will not have any accidents. Maybe this is just a word of relief, but after all, it was said by Dumbledore, and there is a high probability that it will become a reality. Sure enough, after a while, the door was pushed open. Harry, Ron, Ginny, and a slightly silly-looking Lockhart were standing at the door. They looked a little dirty, but they seemed uninjured, especially Ginny, who looked surprisingly good and looked healthier than at any time in the past 2 semesters. The only thing that made her look a little pitiful was that she seemed to have cried a lot. For a moment, there was silence everywhere. Suddenly, a scream. Ginny! It was Mrs. Weasley, who had been sitting in front of the fire crying. She jumped up, followed by Mr. Weasley, who both threw their arms around their baby girl. Then, this woman full of maternal love also hugged Harry and Ron tightly. You saved her! You saved her! What did you do? To be honest, it's not really a rescue. Ginny was fine. Harry recalled the experience after he and Ron entered the Chamber of Secrets. He thought he was facing a terrifying monster, but there was nothing there. Even the identity of the successor was told by Ginny after she woke up. He looked inside the office and found that there was still no sign of Dumbledore. He thought that Dumbledore had not returned to school until now. But Professor McGonagall is here. So he told everything about what happened, including the Mr. Riddle who had been acting with them throughout the semester. But their memories could not recall what Mr. Riddle was lodged in. The only thing they remembered was that it was a thinking thing. Apparently Riddle modified their memories, McGonagall said weakly with a sigh. Ginny! Said Mr. Weasley, dumbfounded. Didn't I teach you? What have I always told you? Never trust anything that can think for itself if you can't see where it keeps its brain. But you. Why didn't you show that thing to me or your mother? A suspicious thing like that is obviously full of dark magic. I don't know, I forgot. Ginny was still crying sadly, and, I think, Mr. Riddle might not really be that bad. In fact, he didn't even hurt me. You're still speaking for him. Ron said angrily. Finally, McGonagall broke their conversation on this topic and asked instead, "So, where did Mr. Riddle go?" "I don't know, Professor, none of us saw him." Ginny said that the other party claimed to kill her, but actually didn't do it. Harry was also confused about this, which is why Ginny always believed that Mr. Riddle was not really a bad person. Mr. Riddle has been dealt with. At this time, Dumbledore opened the door and walked in briskly. He immediately attracted everyone's attention. "I found his escape route, had a duel with him, and defeated him. You kids don't need to fear him." Dumbledore blatantly lied as he looked Ginny up and down. "Miss Weasley looks good, but it's best to go to the hospital wing for a checkup. In addition, I have a few things here that I want to return to their original owners." Dumbledore took out the Marauder's map from his robe and gave it to the twins, who looked happy, returned the cloak to Harry, and finally handed the diary to Ginny. "Sir, what is this?" Arthur asked nervously. "It belongs to Riddle, an object similar to a pensieve. I think Riddle should make some compensation for what happened to Miss Weasley." "Don't worry, this thing is harmless now," Dumbledore said with a smile. "Professor," Harry said hesitantly, "Professor, is it possible that Mr. Riddle is actually not bad person? I mean he didn't ev." "Harry, why did you even say that?" Ron looked at him in shock. "Did you forget about Hermione? Did you forget that he wanted to put Ginny in danger?" "But the basilisk didn't actually kill anyone, right?" Harry said. "Maybe he was avoiding killing people." "It's an interesting guess, Harry. I believe it's because of your own kindness," Dumbledore said, faking a happy smile. "You are a kind person, and subconsciously, kind people assume others to be kind like them. But regarding Riddle's inference, you'd be dead wrong." He seemed to sigh a very long breath, and the whole office was waiting for his next words. "I don't know how he confuses you. He has always been good at confusing people. In fact, I personally taught him 50 years ago at Hogwarts. He is probably the most outstanding person in the history of Hogwarts's students. He disappeared after leaving school, traveled around, traveling to all corners of the world, falling deeper and deeper into the quagmire of black magic, hanging out with the most evil guys in the wizarding world, and going through many dangerous magical transformations. At that time, it was very hard for his close people to recognize his face to the face he had as a student. Later he changed his identity, and we are all familiar with it." He glanced at everyone and said the name heavily. "Yes, Tom Riddle is Voldemort." Time in the office seemed to be frozen all of a sudden. Harry never imagined that he was saying nice things about that other person just now, but in fact, that person actually killed his parents with his own hands 11 years ago. Chapter 86, Almost Exhausted the Stone. In a dark alleyway, a lone figure staggered forward, his robes tattered and his face deathly pale. It was Cyrus. "I finally managed to escape," he thought with a mixture of triumph and exhaustion. His escape from the old bee was nothing to scoff at. Dumbledore's prowess was as formidable as the people say. Cyrus had been forced to use every ounce of his skill and cunning to evade the headmaster's attacks. In the end, he resorted to animating a statue of Grindelwald to create a diversion, allowing him to slip away. The thought of Dumbledore's face as his former friend and lover appeared in front of him brought a wheezy laugh to Cyrus's cracked lips. "Ah, but where is this place?" Looking around, he realized he had operated in an unknown alleyway in his haste to get away. The dank smell of garbage hung thick in the air. Up ahead, the flickering lights of a grimy restaurant spilled onto the street. Grr. His stomach churned. He now had a fully functional body of his own, and he didn't want to use the low amount of magic he had left or the small life essence that was now left just to satiate his hunger. "Guess I'll go and eat then." With leaden steps, Cyrus stumbled towards it. He would need to lie low and regain his strength before doing anything. Fudge is very busy these days, but at least there is good news, that is, the heir who caused trouble during this period has finally been chased out of Hogwarts. In fact, that person has not been arrested and the personnel are still looking for him, and it has been almost half a month, but all the court procedures about declaring that that wanted person is the heir were just completed today. A man named Tom Riddle. However, Fudge thought this was somewhat ridiculous, because according to the situation Dumbledore explained to him, this Tom Riddle seemed to have been 50 years ago. And this morning, he took a look at that heinous criminal in the little memory Dumbledore showed him for identification of the criminal. Unexpectedly, that man didn't look fierce at all. If anything, Fudge felt that he was quite talented and handsome, and he was clearly still a student. How could he be from 50 years ago? But he looked through the roster of graduates at Hogwarts over the years, and indeed found a man named Tom Riddle 50 years ago, but there is currently no evidence to show that the arrested boy is Tom Riddle. The other party has gone missing for quite some time but hasn't done anything in the wizarding world till now. Even Dumbledore himself was a little confused. But no matter what, the boy has already placed all the charges of being the culprit, and after we find him, he will be on his way to Azkaban. He was chased away from Hogwarts and the attacks were stopped. It no longer matters whether the successor is him or not. All the people want is a result, regardless of whether it is right or wrong. Even if it is wrong, Dumbledore endorses it, so what does it have to do with him, Cornelius Fudge? He returned to his office and as soon as he sat down, Umbridge knocked on the door and said sweetly, "Mr. Minister, you have a new appointment." Appointment? Fudge was upset. He didn't remember any important meeting today. "It's Lucius Malfoy." Umbridge held the doorknob with one hand and pressed the other hand on the door frame. Her voice was sharper than before, and her words were full of financial hints. Fudge knew immediately that his fortune was coming. "Let him in." Umbridge smiled as if her throat was being strangled and closed the door. Then, a man with long white hair and a somewhat pretentious look holding an aristocratic silver crutch walked in with his head held high. "Long time no see, Mr. Malfoy. I think you came here because of the curse that threatened other school directors. Let me tell you, this matter is really not that easy to handle. They all want to make you suffer now." As soon as Fudge saw Malfoy, he immediately put on a distressed look, like a shrewd businessman. "I have concerns about this, Minister." Malfoy walked straight to Fudge's table and slammed a full bag in front of Fudge. "But I want to know more, that Tom Riddle." He seemed to have mustered up a lot of courage to say this name. After a pause for a few seconds, he continued, "Did he really fight Dumbledore and escape?" Fudge almost threw himself on the big bag of gold galleons, beaming with joy. "Dumbledore caught him personally. Is that still false? Mr. Malfoy, we all believe that the so-called threat was just a little joke. It would be absurd for anyone to convict you of this. But Hogwarts, I have no way to intervene in the internal decisions of the school board." Fudge quickly put away the large bag of gold galleons, as if he was afraid that Malfoy would regret it. "Minister, can you tell me what was the last place your officers saw him?" he asked, not minding Fudge. "According to reports, he was seen near the Azkaban 2 or 3 days ago." "Thank you very much. I'll take my leave now." Malfoy's expression was gloomy and he knocked the cane in his hand on the ground with a crackling sound. He walked to the door, put his palm on the handle, stopped suddenly, and turned half of his body. "Mr. Malfoy." Lucius looked back at Fudge. "Let me tell you, Mr. Malfoy. Dumbledore actually suspects that you are related to that Riddle," Fudge said, a little embarrassed. Hearing this, Malfoy did not hesitate and immediately threw out another pouch of galleons. "Thank you, Lord Minister, for telling me that." Malfoy closed the door with a bang. After walking out of the Ministry of Magic, Narcissa had been waiting anxiously outside for a long time. When she saw Malfoy coming out, she hurriedly went up to him, took Malfoy's arm, and whispered into her ear, "Is the news true? That person really?" "It's true, but no one knows for sure. I heard that he fought Dumbledore and then escaped. He is last seen near Azkaban. Maybe he was planning to rescue those Death Eaters." This is what Malfoy couldn't figure out. Now, he needs to go near Azkaban to search for him. "You go back and write a visitation application, and we go to see Sirius Black. Let's say that he is plotting against the Black family's property." Narcissa nodded stiffly. Cyrus looked ahead. Azkaban is located in the North Sea, and the temperature here is indeed lower than other places, but it is June after all, so it should not be too cold. The only explanation is that there are a large number of Dementors gathered here. Dementors have the ability to change the climate. 1 or 2 of them can lower the temperature of an area. If a large number of Dementors gather together, they will form a dark world with no daylight. However, if the plan goes well, then he doesn't care about the guards of Azkaban. Chapter 87, Hogwarts' Fifth House, LOL. The temperature in the air had reached freezing point, and the cold was like a steel needle piercing into his skin, bone marrow, and even soul. Cyrus was still looking pale inside the car he had borrowed from someone in the middle of the night as to not use more magic and strain his core. The Aurors were everywhere searching for Tom Riddle, everywhere, not sparing the Muggle world also. The temperature in the air had reached freezing point, and the cold was like a steel needle piercing into his skin, bone marrow, and even soul. When Cyrus opened the gate of the vintage car, the biting chill became even more unbridled. The wind was so strong that it was almost impossible to stand. It was as if there were hundreds of Snapes hiding in the wind and they were all using the Sectum Sempra. The wind hurt like a knife. But Cyrus almost ignored the temperature here and was attracted by the terrifying sight in front of him. Even Voldemort's memory almost never showed the appearance of Azkaban. Cyrus's impression of Azkaban only came from fragments of novels in his previous life. But when you are on the scene, this feeling becomes more obvious. What came into view was a huge black vortex. The strong wind seemed to sweep away the dark clouds from the entire world. The sky became very heavy and low, and seemed to be connected to the grey square tower. Cyrus's eyes turned green and pupils turned horizontal. There are almost no days or nights in Azkaban, let alone seeing the moonlight here. He raised his head looking at the great tower. The Dementors floated in the air, like sharks hovering around their prey, greedily tasting the not too many positive emotions. There are no Aurors stationed in Azkaban now. The Aurors are only responsible for escorting prisoners. To be honest, this is a good thing for Cyrus. The black water laps against the even darker rocks, and the only thing on the island that is pure and flawless is probably the messy tombs that are clustered together but look lonely. It is indeed the fifth house of Hogwarts. It is really magnificent. Cyrus walked through the tomb. The Dementors sensed something, a new soul was here. These wandering soul eaters couldn't hold it any longer after noticing a new snack's smell. They had already absorbed most of the happiness of the prisoners in the prison. At this moment, they were very hungry and eager to taste Cyrus' plate of fresh desserts. A soul that has not been exposed to these so-called soul eaters is more attractive to them than anything else. In comparison, the emotions of other prisoners in the prison are as disgusting as dead fish that have been rotting for hundreds of years. Dementors are some of the ugliest things in the world. They haunt the darkest, filthiest places, they live in decay and despair, and they suck peace, hope, and joy out of the air around them. They were covered in tattered, black robes, and underneath the robes seemed to be dense bones, but they had no faces. Now, hundreds of these disgusting creatures are rushing near the great tower's entrance to catch Cyrus like crazy, fearing that they will completely miss out on the delicious food if they are too late. Cyrus got inside the tower. Entering the great tower, you are greeted by an unbearable stench. It was obvious that no one had ever taken care of it, and the feeling couldn't be compared to 100 Snape's greasers piled together. Stepping into the gate of the tower, the prisoners wearing black and white striped prison uniforms were all unkempt and lying on the ground as if they were dead. As he goes deeper and deeper, the prisoners inside the prison become more and more abnormal. If the prisoners at the front just lost their happiness, as if they had turned on sad rock music at 12 o'clock in the morning and were completely emo, then the deeper parts of the prison were completely a lunatic asylum. The prisoners here are all lying on the ground with their wrists bound, rolling their eyes from time to time, twitching like they are suffering from epilepsy, and making unexplained howls from their mouths. The long-term mental torture made their faces ugly and their bodies haggard. Almost all he saw along the way were Death Eaters who had been imprisoned for more than 10 years. The depths of Azkaban were almost surrounded by Death Eaters. Those who didn't know it was a prison might think that the Death Eaters are holding a department team building here. Their eye sockets were sunken deeply as if a skeleton had been covered with human skin. Cyrus also saw Bellatrix Lestrange and her husband Rodolphus Lestrange, as well as the third member of the family, Robistan Lestrange. In addition, there are Antonin Dolohov, Mulciber. They were all named Death Eaters, some of whom were very old. They were all those who had followed Voldemort when he was in school. Logically speaking, these people have met Tom Riddle. But when Cyrus passed the Death Eaters, none of the madmen noticed him. No one discovered that the person walking was actually their master who disappeared 11 years ago. They all opened their eyes, but what they saw was no longer what was in front of them. They could no longer distinguish between reality and illusion. What appeared in front of them was the most painful illusion in their lives. Normally, the Dementors would not let go of a little bit of happiness, but it was different now. Their shadows quickly shuttled through all the passages in the tower, trying to reach where Cyrus was before the other Dementors. The crazy Death Eaters fell silent for a moment, their eyes stared as if they were about to fall out of their sockets, and their faces were as pale as the tombs on the island. Because whenever they came, all the good feelings and all the happy memories were taken away by them as layers of illusory shadows were pulled out from their bodies. The sudden drop in temperature announced the arrival of the Dementors. Everyone couldn't help but huddle in the corner and open their mouths numbly. There was only one exception, Sirius Black. Chapter 88, Patronus and Sirius. Everyone couldn't help but huddled in the corner and opened their mouths numbly. There was only one exception, Sirius Black. Listening to the group of Death Eaters wailing under the attack of the Dementors was the only thing that made him happy in the past 11 years. It's a pity that his range of actions is limited and he can't see the miserable appearance of those hateful guys. Of course, he could escape punishment if he turned into an animal. Chains couldn't lock a dog's paws, and iron bars couldn't stop a dog's body. Even the Dementors weren't interested in the emotions of animals at all. It's just that Sirius is willing to come to this hell. He does not want to avoid this hell, he is here to atone for his sins. He only used the power of Animagus a few times in the most desperate times, and the rest of the time he relied on his strong will to resist. He was the only sane person in this prison and he had sensed someone coming into this hellish place because that explains the sudden excitement of Dementors. A new prisoner, maybe? Now, he wanted to see how long the new friend could last under the attack of the Dementors before losing consciousness. He saw rows of Dementors passing by in front of him. With the scent of new baits, these soul eaters almost turned a deaf ear to other prisoners. But even so, it's enough for a pot. Not to mention directly facing so many Dementors. It is too easy for these guys to kill a person. It is just a forced compromise for long-term food. He has no sympathy at all in his heart. The new person entered Azkaban, he must be a new prisoner and will be imprisoned for life. There is a high probability that he will not be a good person. But after waiting for a long time, Sirius didn't hear the expected wailing. You didn't just faint, did you? Sirius suddenly felt a little disappointed. The new guy didn't make any movement at all. He probably just passed out. But the next moment, he saw the most surprising scene in his life. The Dementors who were still rushing forward suddenly became panicked. The hungry Dementors behind did not know what was happening and were still moving forward, but the Dementors in front started to run away as if they had encountered something terrifying, making the prison corridors completely blocked. Sirius had never seen the Dementors of Azkaban look so frightened and confused. It was like a wizard meeting Voldemort or an acromantula meeting a basilisk. He wanted to know what happened to make these guards so frightened. He curiously walked to the iron fence and pressed his thin face against the iron fence. The bone-chilling cold hit him instantly, and everything was frozen. His palms were almost frozen to the iron railing, but he didn't care at all, as if the pain at the moment was fake. Then, he saw a group of silver lights from the corner of his eyes. It was an amorphous light, like the moon shining on the clouds, like the wet morning mist diffused in the forest on an autumn morning. A lot of joy suddenly welled up in Sirius's heart. He thought of the happy times he had spent at Hogwarts. Of course, he had done a lot of bad things with James, but apart from being harsh to Snape, it was nothing serious. He thought of every autumn, there would always be mist on the Black Lake. In winter, the entire lake would be frozen, and they would skate on it. He remembered that every moonlit night, 4 marauders would be happy together in the castle, wandering in the night. Then, his eyes became moist. How long had it been since he had recalled these happy memories? Because behind these happy memories, there is always a pain, betrayal, hatred, sadness, and self-blame. When he came back from his happy memories, all the Dementors in Azkaban were gone, and his body was warm. Patronus charm. He said blankly. Yup, that's right. Sirius did not know when this person stood in front of his cell. Looking at the man with tears in his eyes and a look of desolation on his face, Cyrus said softly. Sirius Black, the craziest Death Eater under the Dark Lord, betrayed his closest friend James Potter, and used evil dark magic to kill Peter Pettigrew and 13 Muggles. Who are you? Sirius raised his head. He did not relax his vigilance just because Cyrus released a Patronus curse. On the contrary, it was obviously not a good thing to have such a wizard in Azkaban. There is no need for Sirius to defend himself from the allegations. If he had wanted to say it, he would have told the truth 11 years ago. Even though Pettigrew was dead and had no evidence to prove it, at least Dumbledore might have trusted him. But what's the point? James Potter and Lily Potter will not return from the dead. Who am I? They call me Tom Riddle, but I'd rather you call me Cyrus. Sirius looked at Cyrus, who was wearing a black coat on a white shirt and did not look like the black and white striped uniform of the prisoners. His clothes looked much more gentlemanly on him. He doesn't look like a prisoner at all, but like the warden in charge of Azkaban. I know who you are, Sirius. He said. Ha! Sirius sat down on the ground as if he had heard some funny joke, and said mockingly, every wizard in the UK knows me, the craziest minion of the Dark Lord. I know you are not. Cyrus lowered his voice, you have never betrayed your friends, have you? Peter Pettigrew is the traitor. You did not refute the accusations of others during the trial because it was you who wanted to atone for your sins in Azkaban, didn't you? Sirius's eyes, which had been numb and cloudy, became bright for the first time. Who are you anyway? Who told you this? He asked after calming himself and looking at Cyrus with furrowed brows. It's not important. I can tell you a secret. Chapter 89, Unbreakable Vow. Who are you anyway? Who told you this? It's not important. I can tell you a secret, but you have to do something for me. Don't worry, it's easy and no one will get hurt. Cyrus looked into Sirius's eyes calmly and said softly. I don't care what secrets you have. Sirius refused without hesitation. He didn't want to put his hopes on a stranger who didn't know the details. Who knew who he was and what his ulterior motives were. He dragged his heavy anklets away from the cell door and retreated into the darkness. Are you willing to perish here instead of deciding to leave here and make some compensation for the poor Harry? Don't forget that you are the godfather of that child. You can give him a real home and you can become a family. Harry, the family. When he mentioned this name, Sirius became bright like stars in the night sky, but soon dimmed again. He was discouraged. What can I do for that child? Do you think he will be willing to follow me? Someone who killed his parents? It would have been better without me. Hagrid took him to Lily's relatives and they would raise him. That's just because you don't know his situation. Harry's life at his aunt's house is probably no better than yours. Cyrus shook his head. The closet where he sleeps is not half as big as your cell. Not to mention, he is in danger now, and the man, you know who, has already targeted him. That madman? He has been defeated. Sirius rushed out of the darkness and held on to the iron bars tightly. Been defeated, yes, but is he dead? No. Cyrus scoffed. Cyrus then looked him directly in the eyes. Actually, he came back the year before last. In order to resurrect himself. He tried to get the Philosopher's Stone, but Harry stopped him. He was a brave child. No? But how many times can he stop the mysterious man? And if you really feel guilty and blame yourself for what happened back then you should leave here and do what you should do. You can protect him from being harmed by Peter Pettigrew. He's dead, already dead. I drove him to a dead end. Sirius went crazy as soon as he heard the name of the dirty betrayer. He grinned like a crazy dog. He got to the dead end and blew himself up into ashes, leaving only a little finger. Really, you think so? Did you see his body? Cyrus asked softly. In fact, this was not very convincing. Sirius believed that Peter's body was blown up by dark magic. And since it had been blown up, it was normal that there was no body. However, Cyrus' confident tone still made him waver. Do you think a traitor and cowardly person like him would be willing to sacrifice his life? Sirius seemed to have been hit hard, and he took a step back, trying hard to recall all the details of that year. But he soon discovered that he could find no evidence to prove that Peter Pettigrew was indeed dead. If he is still alive, how could he not show up for so long? Because he is still afraid. Think about it, he told the mysterious man the location of the child. What happened? The mysterious man disappeared. What would those Death Eaters think? Cyrus looked at Sirius, then moved away and looked around at the other prisoners in Azkaban. Sirius quickly understood what he meant. Those who had lost power because of you-know-who's downfall would not let Peter Pettigrew go. Even now, most of the Death Eaters have gone to prison, and the rest may not really be willing for the return of the mysterious man, but if they can kill Pettigrew, at least when the mysterious man returns, they can give him an explanation. You know where he is, don't you? Sirius glared at Cyrus. You know where Peter Pettigrew is? Tell me. Let me kill that traitor. Tell me. He roared so loudly that it even woke up the other Death Eaters who were in a state of numbness. They didn't hear clearly what Cyrus and Sirius said, but they heard Sirius's final roar. Peter Pettigrew, who sent the Dark Lord to his demise, is still alive? This guy who made them suffer so much in this hell is still alive? Boom. Boom. Bellatrix hit the iron railing hard with her head. Let me kill him. Let me go. Her eyes revealed cruel killing intent. She was not seeking freedom, or even escaping from this painful place, but to avenge her master. This is a woman who is loyal to the Dark Lord. In her heart, Voldemort's status has long surpassed that of her own husband, family, and even herself. If Cyrus revealed his identity to her, I'm afraid she would immediately sacrifice her body and soul. And she is also very capable and can do many things for Cyrus. But Cyrus didn't even take his eyes to her. Bellatrix may be very useful, but he can't use her yet. Don't think that he is very powerful just because he drove away hundreds of Dementors at once. If he could do that easily, he would have not sneakingly walked inside and would have fended them off from the outside only. How did he manage to fend them off in this state? In fact, this was because of the internal structure of Azkaban, so he only faced a few Soul Eaters at one time. If he was not inside this tower's corridors, the Soul Eaters would come from all directions. He, who is in a weakened state, so how could he possibly deal with them? Everyone is behind his head in the outside world, so the best place to not get suspected is inside this Azkaban till he reaches his power in the next full moon. He can't contact Malfoy from an owl because the old bee is on high alert. If he goes to Malfoy, Malfoy will be the first to be sent to Azkaban, and who knows what will Dumbledore do to him. I can tell you where Peter Pettigrew is, but I want you to do me a favor. Cyrus put his hand through the gap in the iron fence and stopped in front of Sirius. You must make an unbreakable vow. Cyrus was worried that once Sirius left here, he might have a way to know his identity, and then he might immediately regret it. He hated you-know-who no less than Peter Pettigrew. Unbreakable oath? Then you must find at least one witness. It's not necessary for me. Cyrus took his grubby hands. Really? And you are not using your wand? I mostly don't need a wand nowadays. Cyrus stretched out the fingers of his right hand and touched the left hand that he and Sirius held. Sirius Black, I will tell you about Peter Pettigrew. Can you do one thing for me immediately after you leave Azkaban? I need your assistance to bring back some items from Lucius Malfoy. Lucius Malfoy? Sirius frowned and hesitated a little. Would someone who was related to the Malfoy family be a good person? Are you willing? Cyrus continued to press. You must guarantee that no one will be hurt by this, let alone hurt anyone. Can you guarantee it? Sirius turned his back and looked at Cyrus with a burning gaze. Contrary to his expectations, Cyrus agreed easily. I promise that what I asked you to do will not cause harm to anyone under your subjective will. A thin, dazzling tongue of fire spurted out from Cyrus's fingertips, like a red and hot metal wire, wrapped around their clasped hands. Then I agree. Sirius said impatiently. The second curse seal also locked their arms tightly like a branding iron. Can you guarantee that all the information you gave till now and the information you will give me about Peter Pettigrew will be true? Sirius immediately asked the question he was most concerned about. I promise. Cyrus nodded and said the next oath. You must promise not to reveal information about me to anyone before you complete my mission, and not to ask anyone about me. I would like to ask you. To be continued. Chapter 90, Rewind, Diary Entry. Now that he had made an unbreakable vow with Sirius Black, Cyrus walked toward the basement of the tower, his body aching with exhaustion. He had expended so much of his powers evading Auror's relentless pursuit over the past few days. Now, we just wait. He had to rest, to regain his strength. They would not think to search for him in this forsaken place. Unbuckling his buttons, Cyrus closed his eyes. He replayed the past events in his mind, the moment he had awakened to find himself inexplicably in Tom Riddle's diary. The old wizard had pursued him relentlessly, intent on eliminating this unexpected variable in his plans. A sudden noise made Cyrus's eyes snap open, hand reaching for his wand. Cyrus's hand reached for his wand, but his fingers grasped at empty air. He suddenly recalled the wand to his hand without wasting a second, but a golden light engulfed him and now he wasn't able to move. Making himself calm, he turned and found himself staring into the piercing blue eyes of a man with a long white beard, Albus Dumbledore. A strange expression on his face that Cyrus could not quite decipher. Found you, the old wizard intoned. Before he could react, Dumbledore's wand was pointing on his face, and a blinding flash of light seared Cyrus's vision. Darkness enveloped him, and Cyrus felt himself floating, untethered. As his eyes slowly adjusted, a transparent blue panel materialized before him, the words "You died" emblazoned upon it in stark lettering. Cyrus stared at the panel in disbelief, his mind reeling. No, this can't be the end, he whispered, his voice echoing in the void around him. After a while, he calmed himself. So revealing my system to him was a bad move, hey. Yes, he realized that the old bee was very powerful to go against and was very fearful after finding out about his system, that man was willing to let Riddle like in Azkaban, but the overthinking of him in the wrong direction made him desperate to eliminate Cyrus. When he was thinking about that, the system panel changed and new words popped up in front of his eyes. The new skill, Diary Entry, only works when you die, is taking effect in 5, 4, 3. Cyrus remembered getting this gift after successfully making his new body and resurrecting. 2, 1, 0. Suddenly a white light made him go blind. He felt pain like his whole body was on fire, and he lost consciousness. Ugh! What was all that? After some time, he could once again feel his body. Cyrus slowly opened his eyes, his vision blurry as he tried to make sense of his surroundings. The familiar feeling of magical bindings constricting his limbs told him he was no longer in the void, but back in the physical world. As his eyes finally focused, he found himself staring into Dumbledore's face. "Ah, Tom, know when to surrender. Don't worry, I will not kill you, there are more satisfactory methods to punish someone without killing." Cyrus squinted his eyes, those were the words, the exact same words, he had heard from the mouth of this old bee. Changing yourself a name will not change your situation. It was a feeling of déjà vu. He took a deep breath, looked at the room with a destroyed roof, and his body restricted in the chains from Dumbledore's wand. This was like a memory, or rather, some point in the past. Everything was the same as a month ago after he ran from Hogwarts and fought Dumbledore. The same moment just before he dropped the Legilimency shields of his mind and convinced Dumbledore to look at his origins. It was not a memory, not a remembrance of some point in time. He had really come to the past. He had regressed 1 month before from his original time. He ignored Dumbledore and secretly glanced at the new pop-up. Skill Diary Entry has been successfully used. Cooldown time unknown. Cyrus sighed in his heart, and from the looks of it, it seemed that he had just started to tell Dumbledore about him, and he had just told him to refer to him as Cyrus, and the old bee was blabbering about changing names and whatnot. This time he doesn't intend to undo his Legilimency barriers and tell this oldie about his system. He doesn't want to fight this supreme powerful wizard, he has seen that he is not his opponent, not now at least. Changing yourself a name will not change your situation. Dumbledore said expressionlessly. He looked at the 2 objects in his hand at the moment, and it was obvious that from that traces of magic were detected in the crown. Although the diary also has magical power in it, it does not seem to be a Horcrux. There is no soul of Voldemort in it. It is more like an ordinary pensieve with no other dangers. It seems that you relied on this thing to resurrect? The crown has been missing for nearly 1,000 years. I guess the relics of the other 2 founders were also made into Horcruxes by you, right? He stood up and looked at the crown that had shown signs of time. It was almost impossible to repair this thing. He planned to destroy the crown later. As for the diary, he didn't intend to leave it to Cyrus. This time Cyrus didn't do anything to make him believe that he wasn't from this world. Maybe his previous attempt had given Dumbledore a shock and forced him to use unorthodox methods to eliminate this huge variable. Soon, the Aurors will arrive and you will be escorted to Azkaban, but don't worry, none of us will kill you. I admit that just taking your life will not satisfy me. There are more ways to destroy someone. He waved his wand, trapping Cyrus tightly, took the wand away from his hand, then picked up the Marauder's map and took a look at it, then looked quietly at the sky. The flames had burned the shack completely, and now the moonlight was above their heads. Cyrus doesn't know when the cooldown of that skill will end, he doesn't want to endanger his life. This time he simply enjoyed the moonlight with Dumbledore. He literally died, but he also lived and ate for a whole month in his own body, so even if he was free for only such a short amount of time, it was very precious to Cyrus. The weather is very clear today, but the moon is missing a large piece and is not a full moon. Even if it is, Cyrus is not a scion and cannot transform into a gorilla during the full moon. But, maybe not necessarily, it just takes a little time. Cyrus pursed his lips. Dumbledore stood for a while and found that the man on the Marauder's map had left the office and disappeared in a deserted place. He knew immediately that he had taken action, and now he could return to normal time to fill the void of the moment he disappeared. It's time to go, Tom. Cyrus said nothing and allowed Dumbledore to use magic to lead him away. The same thing happened inside the headmaster's office like before. The Weasleys were worrying for their child, then Harry and Ron with a crying Ginny entered. To be continued. Chapter 91, Slightly Changed Plot. Fudge, just like the previous timeline, is very busy these days, but this time with different news than the previous times. Unlike the previous time where Tom had fled and Fudge had to order the Aurors to search for him, in this timeline, the heir who caused trouble inside Hogwarts has been caught. Well, no one knows what happened in the previous timeline, do they? A man named Tom Riddle was behind all that disturbance inside the school. In fact, that person has been arrested for almost half a month, but all the court procedures were just completed today. However, Fudge thought this was somewhat ridiculous, because according to the situation Dumbledore explained to him, this Tom Riddle seemed to have been 50 years ago. And this morning, he took a look at that heinous criminal before he was taken to Azkaban. Unexpectedly, that man didn't look fierce at all. If anything, Fudge felt that he was quite talented, and he was clearly still a student. How could he be from 50 years ago? But he looked through the roster of graduates at Hogwarts over the years, and indeed found a man named Tom Riddle 50 years ago, but there is currently no evidence to show that the arrested boy is Tom Riddle. The other party neither complained about injustice nor admitted anything he had done. In fact, the boy didn't want to say a word other than saying he had changed his name to Cyrus. Since he had already told Dumbledore about his name before regressing, he naturally didn't contradict himself. And he kept smiling at Dumbledore during the trial. Even Dumbledore himself was a little confused. But no matter what, the boy was already on his way to Azkaban. It no longer matters whether the successor is him or not. All the people want is a result, regardless of whether it is right or wrong. Even if it is wrong, Dumbledore endorses it, so what does it have to do with him, Cornelius Fudge? He returned to his office, and as soon as he sat down, Umbridge knocked on the door and said sweetly, "Mr. Minister, you have a new appointment." The same thing happened and Lucius entered the office, but this time he had slightly different reasons to come here than the previous time. Malfoy walked straight to Fudge's table and slammed a full bag in front of Fudge. "Dear Mr. Minister, I want to know more, that Tom Riddle." He seemed to have mustered up a lot of courage to say this name. After a pause for a few seconds, he continued, "Did he really be caught and sent to Azkaban?" Fudge almost threw himself on the big bag of gold galleons, beaming with joy. "Dumbledore caught him personally. Is that still false?" "Thank you very much. I'll take my leave now." Malfoy's expression was gloomy and he knocked the cane in his hand on the ground with a crackling sound. He walked to the door, put his palm on the handle, stopped suddenly, and turned half of his body. "I wonder if I have the right to see Mr. Tom Riddle. In principle, it's not possible. Let me tell you, Mr. Malfoy. Dumbledore actually suspects that you are related to Riddle," Fudge said a little embarrassed. Hearing this, Malfoy did not hesitate and immediately threw out a large sum of galleons. Fudge took a deep breath and rubbed his fat hands together uncontrollably. "I heard that Mrs. Malfoy has 2 relatives in Azkaban. Why don't you go and visit them? I don't think anyone has the right to disagree with the qualifications." "Thank you, Lord Minister, for your advice." Malfoy closed the door with a bang. Narcissa had been waiting anxiously outside. "Is the news true? That person really?" "It's true, but no one knows whether he was really imprisoned or did it on purpose. I heard that he kept smiling during the trial. Maybe he was planning to rescue those Death Eaters," Lucius explained. "You go back and write a visitation application, and we go to see Sirius Black. Let's say that he is plotting against the Black family's property." Narcissa nodded stiffly. Cyrus faced the floor, his hands were fastened behind his back by magic, his legs were bent, and his originally meticulous black hair fell down, blocking his sight. The prison car kept moving forward. He didn't know how long it took before he heard thunder coming from outside. At the same time, the temperature in the air began to drop. Cyrus immediately realized that he was now close to Azkaban. "We are here again, hey." The hair on his forehead was shaking. Suddenly, a hair fell down and turned into a green leaf in front of his eyes. Cyrus quickly raised his chin to catch the blade and put it in his mouth. "These are the leaves of mandrake." Cyrus just picked a few pieces thinking they might be useful. Unexpectedly, they have become his life-saving straw now. Half a month ago, the night he was caught by Dumbledore, he had already thought about how to escape from Dumbledore's clutches without risking his life and letting him know about his origins. Becoming an animagus is the best way. It wasn't easy to do, but it was his last resort and today was a full moon. To complete the animagus transformation, he needed several other materials. He was betting that Lucius Malfoy would definitely come to Azkaban to visit him after he found out that he was in prison. "Your journey has come to an end, Tom Riddle." The prison carriage pulled by the Thestrals suddenly stopped. The wind outside the carriage was like the roar of a huge machine, which made the Auror driving the carriage have to shout at the top of his lungs. But without the other party's reminder, Cyrus himself could clearly detect the difference here. The restraining magic on Cyrus' body was partially released, but his hands were still tightly locked, and his whole body was hit hard on the floor of the prison car. The aura reached out and grabbed his shoulders, lifting him up. This was a very muscular aura with grey hair and no smile at all. But in a place like this, even the most optimistic person might not be able to laugh. Cyrus learned the other party's name, John Dellis, when he was being put into the prison van. "Get down!" Dellis pulled Cyrus out of the prison car without ceremony. The wind was so strong that it was almost impossible to stand. If he wanted to become an animagus, he could not do without the moonlight. First, he needs to hold a mandrake leaf in his mouth for a full month, and this must be from one full moon to the second full moon. Cyrus deliberately remained silent during the trial in order to delay the trial and wait for the full moon. The first step is just a time requirement, but the second step is inseparable from the magic of moonlight. On the second full moon, he would put the leaves soaked in his saliva into a small transparent bottle and let it receive pure moonlight. But there is no moonlight in Azkaban. He must have not paid it much thought in the previous run. In this way, even if he has superb magic power and can use his fingers instead of wands, what is the use of letting Lucius secretly deliver dew in the pupae of the demon-faced hawk moth? A sense of powerlessness began to sprout from his heart, and it grew rapidly, turning into despair and spreading quickly. He felt like a pitiful and weak candle looming in the endless storm. The tiny flame of hope was fragile and would be extinguished in an instant. His body was shivering with cold, as if he had fallen into a sea of ice. "Go inside quickly!" Dellis's cold and powerful roar suddenly pulled Cyrus out of despair. He suddenly realized that something was wrong. It was just that there was no moonlight in Azkaban. There was no solution. Although it was a little more troublesome, it was not to the point where he suddenly fell into despair. While being pointed by Dellis with his wand towards the great tower, he raised his head. The Dementors had already floating on top of him. It was this thing that sucked away the hope in Cyrus's heart just now, making him suddenly become negative and not want to think about anything. Dellis seemed to be very disgusted and afraid of these monsters. He didn't want to stay here for a moment longer. He just waited to send Cyrus to the prison and immediately left this frightening place. It is indeed the fifth house of Hogwarts. It is really magnificent. Cyrus made the same joke he had made the last time because he was not alone this time. He and Dellis walked through the tomb, and Dellis was not interested in Cyrus' little humor at all. "So, Mr. Auror, nobody is gonna welcome me, het? How come? I heard that the people in Azkaban are very nice to talk to and that they are all talents. I thought there should be at least one big welcome party, a chair and a hat at the door and chant, Cyrus, Azkaban, and then some applause." He didn't expect Dellis to answer him, but in fact, the corner of the big man's mouth curved slightly, revealing a cruel smile. "Nice talk? I didn't expect you to be crazy before you even went to jail. When you see those prisoners who are sentenced to life imprisonment like you will know how nice and welcoming they are." Chapter 92, Visitors. Everything after that happened like the previous time, and Cyrus made an unbreakable vow with Sirius like the previous, just this time he didn't have a wand, so had to use his hand to cast the Patronus charm. Patronus charm? Tom can actually use the Patronus charm. Dumbledore sat in his office, putting down the letter in his hand, with a surprised expression on his face. This letter was sent to him by Fudge from the Ministry of Magic, which had a department dedicated to communicating with Dementors. A few days ago, the leader of the Dementors, who was driven away by Cyrus with the Patronus charm, contacted the Ministry of Magic and asked them why they allowed prisoners to enter Azkaban with wands. To this end, the Ministry of Magic specially conducted a second inspection on Cyrus, and only then confirmed that the young-looking wizard could cast some spells without a wand. Looking at it this way, the young man looks more like the descendant of the Great Wizard, the successor of Slytherin, than before. Because Dumbledore paid special attention to Cyrus, Fudge immediately wrote a letter to Dumbledore. At the same time, this smooth guy was also worried that Cyrus might use this method to escape from Azkaban, so he was abnormally worried that even Malfoy's previous application had been pushed back several times. Fudge wrote this letter to ask Dumbledore to strengthen the magical confinement of Cyrus. Even if the other party left the prison, he would not be able to deal with a large number of Dementors, but if those guys could not enter the prison, they would not be able to deal with other Death Eaters and feel dissatisfied. For Dumbledore, throughout the school year, Tom Riddle gave him a very strong sense of weirdness. If Tom didn't choose to kill the students who were attacked directly at the beginning because he was worried about his immediate demise, many things that followed were difficult to explain. The other party could have killed Ginny Weasley, but he didn't, and the killing curse he fired that night had almost no power. Now, Tom Riddle has cast a Patronus without a wand inside the prison. This is not an ordinary curse. Voldemort, who does not understand love and many other positive emotions, could not have used the Patronus this easily. Thinking that the other party had emphasized that his name was Cyrus, Dumbledore doubted his own judgment for the first time. Isn't he really Tom Riddle? But no matter which possibility it was really necessary for him to go to Azkaban himself and cast a powerful anti-locking spell on the opponent's shackles. It would be better to add some other magical restraints. It just so happened that school was on holiday now. Without any delay, Dumbledore grabbed a handful of flow powder and got into the fireplace. The British Ministry of Magic. Green flames suddenly ignited, and in an instant, Dumbledore was brought to the hall of the Ministry of Magic. Fudge had been waiting for a long time. "You're here, Dumbledore." He hurried up to meet and said slightly nervously, "Let's leave immediately, otherwise we don't know what trouble those Dementors are going to cause." "I have long warned that letting Dementors guard Azkaban is not a good choice," Dumbledore said. It was common knowledge that he disliked the guards at Azkaban. But the Ministry of Magic obviously doesn't think so. Those soul-eating Dementors staying in Azkaban can be said to be put to good use. If they are not allowed to stay there, the Ministry of Magic will have to find a way to deal with these troublesome things. "Let's talk about this later." Fudge was vague. He was not tall. Standing next to Dumbledore, he looked almost a head shorter than him. Dumbledore was not surprised by his attitude towards the Dementors. In fact, no one has any objection to letting Dementors guard Azkaban since Eldritch Diggory, the fourth Minister of Magic, proposed to ban the Dementors but failed. Dumbledore's arrival was expected by Cyrus, and he was even prepared that the other party would move him to another place to be locked up alone, but Dumbledore only left a powerful protective spell on his cell, ensuring that even if he gets the wand, he can't easily leave the cage. Once the magic on the cage begins to collapse, the magic will immediately leave a mark on Cyrus, and Dumbledore will immediately know Cyrus's location. "I think you can add a little insurance to ensure that he can't perform any magic," Fudge said worriedly. According to Dumbledore's approach, the demands of the Dementors have not been resolved at all. "I think the Minister of Magic is right. If you are so afraid of me, why don't you tie me up with iron chains?" Cyrus raised his eyebrows. He was deliberately irritating Dumbledore. From the first time the two met in their true colors, Dumbledore immediately felt that Cyrus and Voldemort were two different individuals. But young Tom Riddle was extremely good at demagoguery, and this left a deep impression on him. When it comes to Voldemort, Dumbledore would rather kill the wrong person. Having said that, since the Tom who called himself Cyrus in front of him really made him feel different, he was willing to give the maximum tolerance, that is, to narrow the scope of Cyrus' magic to only affecting his own cell was considered payback for not actually harming any of the little wizards in Hogwarts. "Tom, I only hope that you can learn to repent well in Azkaban," Dumbledore said softly, "especially seeing how painful your old friends are. It would be worse to die than to lose what is left to them as a little bit of happy time. This is not like the speech of the Saint Dumbledore." "I never was." Dumbledore left. He passed by the cells of many Death Eaters. Most of them were crazy or simply rolled their eyes and fell to the ground. There was only one exception. When he passed in front of Sirius' cell, the prisoner inside looked at him like a quiet black dog. There was a trace of complaint hidden under the calm gaze. Dumbledore was a little surprised. "Sirius," Fudge said immediately after noticing Dumbledore's brief pause, "I heard that he seemed crazy when he first came in, but now he is honest. Isn't that right, Mr. Black?" Sirius said nothing. "Let's leave." Dumbledore left. Azkaban once again sent away its visitors, but soon new ones arrived. After sending Dumbledore away, Fudge finally gained confidence in the safety of Azkaban, and Malfoy's application was finally approved. The couple separated after entering Azkaban. Although Fudge acquiesced, he also came with him as a companion, but he only stopped in front of Sirius' cell, leaving plenty of space for Malfoy. He didn't think Malfoy could make any trouble. Azkaban was not one that could be taken casually. Malfoy had been ensured that there was nothing in his hands that could help any prisoner leave, let alone Tom Riddle's cell. Dumbledore also cast spells on that cell himself. "Sirius, I hope you can give me the Gringotts key to the Black family. You have been sentenced to life imprisonment, and I am also one of the legal heirs to the Black family's legacy." Narcissa couldn't help but look at him. Glancing deeper, she was completely distracted. Give the Black family inheritance to Malfoy? I think you are crazy. Sirius grinned. Even though he had promised the man named Cyrus to briefly cooperate with Malfoy, but that didn't mean he had any good feelings about the Malfoys. Not to mention, he could have left his legacy to Harry. What's wrong? Is it possible that the Malfoy family is also starting to be short of money? I think, maybe, Draco, he needs. Narcissa felt like she was suffering every moment. She was worried about whether the Dark Lord was really in a cell like this. In fact, this possibility is probably very small. She is more worried about whether the other party is satisfied with Draco. Worried that he might be not impressed by Draco. Sirius seemed unwilling to pay attention to her. He turned his dark but shining eyes to Fudge, who was reading the newspaper. Have you finished reading the newspaper? If so, why don't you give it to me? Why do you want it? I want to do some crossword puzzles to pass the time. You know it's really boring here. But Fudge hesitated. Malfoy was impatient to stay here anymore. He didn't want to make the Dark Lord wait for any more than this. I had an interesting friend a few days ago, but it's a pity. Sirius started blabbering and Malfoy also looked at Fudge with impatience. Okay, just take it. Fudge threw the newspaper to him impatiently. Chapter 93, Sirius escapes. You're finally here, Lucius. As expected. In the cell, Cyrus leaned against the wall leisurely. However, having said that, Cyrus was actually not sure whether Malfoy would come to see him in prison by himself. In fact, even if the other party didn't come, Cyrus planned to let Sirius go find Malfoy. These days, he spends most of his time immersed in his own memories. Although it is no longer a Horcrux, the ability similar to a pensieve that he had as a diary still remains. Master. Malfoy knelt humbly in front of the cell, lowering his head anxiously. He did not dare to ask any questions and could only wait for Cyrus' instructions. I want you to help me with something more, Lucius. Cyrus slowly walked up to him, and controlled the sand with his magic power to form a line of text in front of him. Help me get these things. Lucius hardly looked carefully at what those things were. In fact, it wasn't important. What was important was how to bring these things into Azkaban. Master, I'm afraid it's difficult. The Ministry of Magic will not allow me to bring anything to Azkaban. He said fearfully, fearing that Cyrus would think he was incompetent. Don't worry, Lucius, Black will help you. Black? Sirius Black? Lucius raised his head in surprise. It turned out that that person more than 10 years ago actually took refuge in the Dark Lord? But he clearly remembered that the person who surrendered to the Dark Lord was actually Peter Pettigrew? That ugly little fat man once had appeared in front of him with the Dark Lord. But, he is also in Azkaban. I know, I have a way to get him out. Cyrus tried his best to appear inscrutable in front of Malfoy. At the same time, I have a way to get him to come in with those things. As he said this, Cyrus suddenly thought of something. Lucius, can the disapparition of house elves be effective in Azkaban? I'm afraid not, Master, Lucius said immediately. After all, Azkaban and Hogwarts are different. Hogwarts needs the services of house elves, so another house elf signal was probably ignored, but this prison does not. Azkaban has been established as a prison for hundreds of years. If there is a loophole, it cannot be ignored forever. Master, if you need Dobby's service, I will let him assist you when you leave here. This is his honor. Let's talk about this later. You just need to take care of my affairs first. Black will take the initiative to find you later. I see. Lucius didn't stay long before leaving. He almost left before Sirius came to Cyrus' cell angrily holding the newspaper. He's alive. He's alive. He walked around anxiously, stepping hard on the ground with his bare feet. He wished he could appear in front of the fat coward right now, not using magic, but tearing him apart with his fangs. I told you a long time ago. Cyrus was not surprised by his behavior at this moment but casually took out the newspaper that Sirius was holding tightly and flattened it. In the newspaper, the photo of the Weasley family with the rat that was missing a finger was so dazzling. More importantly, this Weasley happened to be Harry's roommate. For the entire 2 school years, Harry was actually in danger. Fortunately, Peter Pettigrew is a coward who has a tendency to do things at the end when the arrow is sure to hit the target, and he did not dare to act rashly. Sirius was in a daze. No one knew if he heard what Cyrus said. At this moment, his eyes were bloodshot and he yelled vaguely, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him. Of course, but before that, don't forget what you promised me. Cyrus said softly, otherwise you may not have time to kill him and die immediately because of the vow. But if he lives, he will surely threaten Harry's life. Maybe present Harry to the Dark Lord. Sirius calmed down as if a bucket of cold water had been poured on him. He was not afraid of death, he was only afraid that he would not be able to kill his enemy, and that Harry would be injured. I will complete your mission first. Don't worry, I just want you to come back here before the next full moon with what Malfoy gave you. In the meantime, I think you can take some time and go to Privet Drive to see how the poor boy is doing. Cyrus said tolerantly, how pitiful, isn't it? No matter how many days have passed, everyone remembers the day he lost his family. Sirius was suffocating with grief, and he didn't want to talk to Cyrus about it. His body bent down, his clothes turned into fur, and he transformed into a big black dog. Sirius was about to bite the newspaper and leave, but Cyrus stopped him. You're leaving anyway, so you might as well leave this thing to me. Crossword puzzles are quite good to pass the time. Cyrus said while applying several waterproof spells and other spells to his body, making sure Sirius gets out of Azkaban as soon as possible. Then, he watched Sirius leave Azkaban. Sirius has now officially escaped from prison. He escaped from prison. Scrimgeour, the head of the Auror office, almost rushed to Fudge's office. I really don't understand why you agreed to the matter of Malfoy visiting him. What? That Tom Riddle escaped from prison. Fudge almost jumped up in panic. It would be terrible for him if the fact that he agreed to let Malfoy secretly meet Tom Riddle was revealed after the other party escaped from prison. However, he was also surprised at the same time. How did Scrimgeour know about him letting Malfoy meet Riddle? He concealed it very well, even when he went to Azkaban, he accompanied him personally. What Tom Riddle? Now it was Scrimgeour's turn to be surprised, isn't it Sirius Black that Malfoy went to visit? Ahem, it's indeed Sirius. Fudge coughed twice and felt relieved. Malfoy's visit to Black was actually not a big deal. As he had told Malfoy before, the two families were related. Moreover, Malfoy cleverly used the excuse of getting the Black family property. Considering this aspect, Malfoy was freed from the suspicion of assisting Sirius in escaping from prison. But what he couldn't figure out was how could the good-natured Sirius escape from prison. He recalled the Sirius he saw in prison at that time, and the other person's rationality was indeed a bit beyond his expectation. But even so, how did he escape the siege of the Dementors? Start searching for his traces immediately. Are there any clues in Azkaban? On the one hand, Fudge put aside his worries, but on the other hand, he was worried that this terrible thug would cause a tragic attack. I heard that before he escaped from prison, someone heard him yelling frantically, he's still alive. I guess he might be referring to Harry Potter. Scrimgeour said with a solemn face. Fudge's face suddenly turned pale. You mean, maybe he's targeting that child? Chapter 94, My Brother? A hero? There is no day or night in Azkaban, the only embellishment is the roar of the prisoners every morning, indicating a new day has arrived. It didn't take long for Cyrus to tire of newspaper crossword puzzles, which were a waste of time even in Azkaban. If you have this much free time, it would be better to practice more magic. These days, he has become more and more proficient in the Patronus charm. The short-term freedom and happiness filled almost all his emotions, and the silver thread turned into a huge flying bird, an eagle, before his eyes. After Sirius left Azkaban, the number of Dementors remaining in Azkaban prison became much smaller. Fudge used them as manpower to search for signs of Sirius, but unfortunately, this plan was doomed to begin with. But for Cyrus, that's a good thing. After the number of Dementors was reduced sharply, their impact on the climate near Azkaban was also reduced. The dark clouds seemed to be a little thinner, and sometimes there were even a few weak rays of sunlight. Soon, the deadline for the second full moon is approaching. A big black dog suddenly rushed up to the shore, shaking off the wet water droplets on its fur. There is also a small cloth bag in its mouth. Sirius glanced upwards with his round eyes. The hateful bunch of Dementors were still flying aimlessly in the sky, showing no interest in a black dog like him. However, he still moved cautiously towards the great tower. After passing through many prisoners' cells, Sirius finally found Cyrus in the deepest part. He passed through the iron bars and transformed back into his human form in front of Cyrus. He looked the same as before not long ago, except for a change of clothes, but he was still dirty and unkempt, and his hair was even greasier than Snape's. You finally were free after a long time, but you still didn't know how to clean yourself up. Cyrus took a step back in disgust, pointed at Sirius, and cast a cleaning spell. In an instant, the stench on the dirty homeless man's body disappeared immediately, revealing a thin face that didn't look so healthy. I didn't have that much time. Besides, the waterproof spell you cast on me last time is of no use at all. It was ineffective immediately after leaving the prison. Sirius threw the bag to Cyrus, and he wished he could do it now, that is, to return immediately. Anyway, he has done everything according to his oath. This is because Dumbledore's magic locked my magic in this cell. Cyrus said, I believe you don't mind doing me another favor. What? Sirius did not refuse directly, but looked at Cyrus in confusion. In fact, he was also very curious about what Cyrus asked Malfoy to bring. The fear that Malfoy showed when he heard the name Tom Riddle also made Sirius very surprised. But due to his oath, he couldn't inquire about anything related to Cyrus. At this time, Cyrus took out the contents from the small bag that had been cast with the invisible stretching charm, a wand, a Nimbus 2000, a small transparent bottle, a bottle of Duel, and the most outrageous thing about the pupa of the Grimace Hawkmoth is that Malfoy even thoughtfully prepared a small bottle of Felix Felicis. The transparent glass bottle contains a few drops of golden potion. Now, Sirius knew what the other party wanted to do. Are you planning to practice Animagus here? He asked with a ridiculous look on his face. Animagus is not an easy transformation. Generally speaking, in order to practice Animagus, a wizard may need to prepare for a long time, some even for several years. Not to mention in a harsh environment like Azkaban. What's wrong? Is there any problem? Cyrus first picked up the wand and looked at it carefully. He quickly figured out that the wand was made of yew wood and the core was phoenix feathers. Malfoy custom made a wand made of the same material as the wand Voldemort used before, but Cyrus felt that it was not as smooth as the one he remembered. Of course, for a powerful wizard like him, unless it is some special wand, there is no big difference. Of course, there is a problem. Moonlight, how are you going to solve it? That's why I want you to help me. Cyrus spat out the mandrake blade that had been in his mouth for a month, protected it with magic, and then pulled out a piece of his hair and placed them together. Everything was handed over to Sirius now. I could have thought of a way to break through the clouds with these things on my own, but Dumbledore's magic restricted me, and my spell couldn't leave the cage. But you can. Cyrus looked at him and continued, in exchange, I can give you another piece of information. You have something to do with Peter Pettigrew that you are hiding from me. Not Peter Pettigrew, but your brother, Regulus Black. Sirius fell into a brief silence with surprise and a little sadness on his face, but it was soon replaced by a sneer, and he said sarcastically. Regulus? Why do I need to know about that coward? Why do I need to know about a filthy Death Eater? I don't want to know at all what stinky corner he died in. But what if he is not a coward? He is just a child who accidentally went astray, but returned. Cyrus looked into Sirius's eyes and said softly, he is actually a hero. And more importantly, he also holds the key to destroying the mysterious man. What an irony, isn't it? The well-known war hero Pettigrew is actually just a traitor who betrayed his friends, yet the man who was always thought to be a loyal follower of you-know-who is actually a true hero. What are you talking about? Do you even know anything about him? At least I know your brother better than you do. Sirius was speechless for a moment. He had been at odds with his family when he was a child, and had already defected to the Potter family before he graduated. He really didn't understand his submissive brother at all, and he never cared about him. He just remembers that the other person was always proud of being a pure-blooded wizard, and the heir to the Black family that his mother, who hates muggles, is most proud of. They were not that close to each other when they were in school, and they parted ways immediately after graduation. Today someone actually told him that his brother, a Death Eater, was actually an unknown hero? But what concerned him more was what Cyrus said was the key to eliminating the mysterious man. Didn't they make so many sacrifices more than 10 years ago just to eliminate the mysterious man? Sirius couldn't say no, in fact he wasn't going to say no in the first place. Cyrus had done him a great favor by telling him about Peter Pettigrew and Harry's situation. What happened with Regulus could only be an unexpected surprise to him. As for the mysterious Cyrus himself? Although Sirius was still very curious, he could at least be sure that the other party was not one of Voldemort's group, and that was enough. Chapter 95, adding word Animagus to the original spell. The big silver-coated black German Schafard broke through the deep clouds, driving away the Dementor Sirius Patronus. And Sirius took the mandrake soaked in morning dew and the grimace hawk moth riding a broom through the clouds and came under the moonlight. The magic of the silver moonlight began to have some influence on the materials in the small glass bottle. It was very cold in the high altitude of Azkaban, and the icy wind cut his thin body. He needed to perform some delicate operations under the moonlight in the sky. He had to put the mandrake into the glass bottle under the moonlight, and then add the dew, Cyrus hair, and chrysalis of the ghost moth. The sequence of this process must not be disrupted, otherwise a magic accident is likely to occur, so he must be very focused at the moment. After a while, Sirius came back with the glass bottle containing the potion in his mouth, and he threw the broom on the ground. Okay, now you just need to put it in a dark corner where the sun doesn't shine. Fortunately, there are places like this everywhere. Yes. Cyrus waved his hand, and the small bottle disappeared immediately. Then you need to wait for the first burst of thunder before the storm comes. Sirius was just halfway through speaking when thunder sounded outside the window, and the heavy dark clouds could not even be penetrated by lightning. His expression was very helpless. That's the worst part. In Azkaban, it's hard to tell which burst of thunder is a sign of a storm. Don't think about using magic to summon a storm, otherwise, it may have a bad impact. Don't worry, even if I want to, my magic can't break through this cage for the time being. Cyrus said. It would be possible to force a breakthrough, but Cyrus didn't want to alarm Dumbledore. That's best. In addition, don't forget to point your wand at your heart and recite a spell at every sunrise and sunset while waiting for the storm. Sirius reminded, you are new here so I think you shouldn't have adjusted much. Things like forgetting the time in the outside world must not be a problem, right? How could it be? There has always been a clock keeping time in my memory. And last time Malfoy told me the time and I already know the general direction of Azkaban. It is not difficult to calculate the time of sunrise and sunset. Cyrus said. There are still a few hours before dawn. I'd better tell you about Regulus first. Cyrus spent about half an hour telling Sirius about Regulus's experience. Of course, he concealed the existence of the Horcrux and that it was Slytherin's pendant. He just said that it was something very important to Voldemort. You mean, he gave Kreaker a chance to live and died in that huge lake? Sirius' face was full of disbelief. There is such a kind-hearted child in the Black family. If only those ancestors who were proud of being pure-blooded and liked to chop off the heads of house elves as decorations knew that Regulus had given the chance of survival to a lowly creature and willingly met his death. The Black family ancestors would probably be furious to the point of bursting their coffins, wouldn't they? He was a good boy, but he took the wrong path. Cyrus said softly, but later he saw clearly the true nature of Death Eaters, and he immediately abandoned the darkness and turned to the light. Where is the cave? Where is that thing that is important to the Dark Lord? Who knows? Maybe Regulus has found a way to destroy it, or maybe he hasn't. Cyrus said nonchalantly. In fact, he was very interested in the pendant. Among the treasures left by the four founders, only the pendant was the one whose power is unknown. If you have a chance, you can talk to Dumbledore about this. Dumbledore, Sirius laughed self-deprecatingly, I think if he sees me, he would probably capture me immediately and give me to the Dementors. I'm not afraid of death, but at least I have to first kill that despicable traitor. Sirius left in a hurry again. Cyrus originally wanted to give him the broom, but the guy ran so fast that Cyrus had no time to speak. It can be seen that he actually cares about his brother, but the most important and urgent thing now is to kill Peter Pettigrew first. This is not easy. The Ministry of Magic is hunting him very closely, and even the Muggle world is looking for him. Once he sets foot on British soil, he doesn't even get a chance to return to his human form. If he hadn't been an unregistered Animagus, he might have been arrested several times. Cyrus felt the humidity in the air and the movement of clouds and rain. Soon, the clock that kept turning in his memory turned to 3 o'clock in the morning, and it was soon the time of sunrise. Azkaban is located in the North Sea. Considering the climate here, it should be relatively north. The summer nights may only last 5 or 6 hours. Cyrus faced northeast, and the clouds seemed a little darker in the middle and brighter on that side. However, in order to avoid making mistakes, Cyrus still chose to take a small drop of Felix Felicis. Suddenly, a strange feeling immediately lingered in his heart. He felt as if he was very light, and his confidence spread like a devil's net. The aura in my mind exploded like a bolt of lightning. Ah, I'm feeling so lucky. He suddenly felt that maybe he should do something else. The incantation for Animagus was, Amato, Animo, Animato, Animagus. It's natural to use what kind of spell you want. It's impossible for you to have fluorescent lights stuck in your mouth and flicker, but your wand will shoot a death curse. But what if I changed the incantation? The voice kept echoing in Cyrus's mind. It was very tempting, but reason made Cyrus hesitate. Lucky potion is not a lucky potion, nor is it a panacea. It cannot change the inherent factors of the outside world. All it can do is make you feel that everything is going well and is going to go well in the future too. But the strong omen in his heart gradually convinced Cyrus. He picked up the wand and pointed it at his heart, and a new but vague spell burst into his mind inexplicably, as if a distant voice was whispering in his ear. Amato, Animo, Animato, Animagus Imagmagus. He added the word. In the black world, a big golden bird spreads its broad wings. Boom! Boom! A powerful second heartbeat suddenly began to beat in Cyrus's chest, as if it were a violent drumbeat. Usually, wizards couldn't feel the second heartbeat immediately when practicing Animagus, but at this moment, the two beating hearts in Cyrus's chest seemed to start overlapping. The entire Azkaban was engulfed in a huge whirlpool of magic, as if the black rocky clouds were also flowing, forming a huge wind barrier. The sky seemed to have a hole, engulfing everything. A huge eye of the storm appeared over Azkaban. The rising morning light and the moonlight about to fall into the sea tilted down together, like a gentle veil enveloping Cyrus. He suddenly felt that the air became even more humid than before. This was a sign that a storm was approaching. Boom! The first lightning tore through the night sky. Cyrus immediately took out the glass bottle. In just a few hours, the mandrake and the chrysalis of the ghost moth in the bottle had disappeared, replaced by a crystal-clear, blood-red potion. Following the premonition in his heart, Cyrus drank all the blood-red potion in one gulp. He immediately felt a severe pain in his body, and the sound of the second heartbeat was stronger than before. He felt as if his body was being replaced by something else. It was a huge bird with golden wings. His handsome face began to distort, his mouth protruded forward, turning into a sharp beak, his ears turned into beautiful feathers on both sides, his hands became wings, and two smaller wings grew behind him, his legs also became huge claws. In an instant, the huge body filled the entire cell. Chapter 96, Home is behind you and the world is in front of you. What the fuck? Sirius rolled awkwardly in the water and was almost knocked into the bottom of the sea by the surging waves. The weather was still fine when he left Azkaban. It had only been 2 or 3 hours, so the storm came a little too hastily. In fact, he has been in Azkaban for almost 12 years and knows the climate here better than anyone else. Although the weather on the sea is unpredictable, Azkaban will only experience frequent and severe storms after October. It's only July, and this storm is a little too unusual. He turned his head and glanced behind him, and found that the distant Azkaban was completely shrouded in darkness. The heavy black clouds were almost connected to the sea surface, and thunder and lightning were moving through the clouds like snakes. Now he couldn't help but worry about Cyrus. I finally made preparations for him, but I didn't expect to encounter a storm on the first day. It would have been better if the storm came after a day or two, that way, he would have been prepared. It seems that he may not be able to become an animagus this time. However, Sirius didn't feel much regret. It would be strange if animagus could be trained so easily. They had spent several years practicing on their own back then, and it was perfectly normal to accidentally swallow the mandrake leaves. Sometimes the four of us oversleep together, we even forget the incantation sometimes, or fail to figure out when the sun rises and sets on a rainy day. Anyway, you are not afraid of the Dementors. After I kill the traitor, I will come back and help you slowly, if I am still alive at that time. Thunder! A bolt of lightning struck the sea in the distance. Sirius suddenly came to his senses, took a deep breath, and plunged into the sea. The thunderstorm was so powerful that he couldn't help but suspect that there was a huge thunderbird soaring in the clouds, exerting its power. In fact, his guess was absolutely correct. At this moment, in the huge clouds, a golden bird with 3 pairs of wings entangled by thunder and lightning stirred the thunderclouds. The powerful magic turned into terrifying thunder and lightning in the gaps between its feathers, shooting down the ugly soul-eating Dementors floating in the air one by one. And this thunderbird is Cyrus himself. The spell that popped out of his mind in a flash of inspiration really worked, and he became the first wizard to complete the transformation of magical animals. This is completely different from the 5-legged monster failure. Thunderbirds are related to phoenixes, and are recognized as 5x level magical animals by the Ministry of Magic. In terms of danger alone, Thunderbirds are on the same level as fire dragons. After becoming a Thunderbird, Cyrus also gained the power of a Thunderbird. Controlling thunderstorms seemed to be his innate talent, as simple as breathing. He only needs to flap his wings now, and the thunder clouds will grow. With just one thought, the thunder will fall like a heavy hammer. His body undulated in the clouds like a dragon, and his huge claws pierced the thick clouds like gold and iron, catching a Dementor. There are almost 100 Dementors left in Azkaban. They are frantically surrounding Cyrus, but they are unable to get close to the sacred figure. The turbulent airflow and fierce thunder and lightning have become an impenetrable barrier. In the end, they were unable to follow behind Cyrus. They could only raise their empty faces one by one and watch the golden bird take one of their tribe members and fly away. None of the Dementors had any intention of pursuing him. They are actually not interested in animals at all, and the reason why they attacked Cyrus in the first place was just to protect their territory. Now that the Thunderbird has left, they don't bother to pursue it. Cyrus finally felt what true freedom was. He flew on the clouds for an unknown length of time, but it was obvious that the surrounding climate had become warmer. The dark sea area of Azkaban has long been left behind, replaced by tall and green mountains. Home is behind you, and the world is in front of you. So he immediately folded his wings and prepared to land. The land beneath his feet might not be new, but it was new life for him. At the same time, his posture also changed a little. The 2 pairs of smaller wings on his back disappeared first, and his size began to shrink rapidly, so small that his claws could no longer grasp the Dementors, allowing it to break free. Then, the long tail behind him also became much smaller. Instead of immediately changing back into a human being, he first transformed into an eagle. This is his second transformed form, not a magical beast, but a true Animagus. That wonderful spell not only allowed Cyrus to accomplish an unprecedented feat, but also allowed him to complete his Animagus transformation. At that time, it was not just a second heartbeat that sounded in his chest, but also a third. In fact, it was only because of his Animagus form that he could pass through the iron bars of the cell without Dumbledore noticing anything unusual. He dived down quickly and turned back into his human form when he was about to land. His slender body rolled on the ground. When he stood up, the prison uniform on his body had disappeared and was replaced by a green robe, which was the same as the night he planned to escape. The only difference is probably that Cyrus' appearance has changed slightly at this moment. The ends of his hair were dyed with a little bit of gold, and his pupils were like an eagle, and his vision could see very far. This is probably a side effect of the incantation, Animagus. Just like Animagus will leave some characteristics of the shapeshifter after transforming, when it comes to Animagus, the situation is reversed. The characteristics of Thunderbird are reflected in Cyrus' original appearance. But this only made him look more handsome than before. Finally, finally free. Cyrus exhaled deeply. No one knew how much pressure he felt after fighting Dumbledore that night. That is the most powerful wizard in the world. But now, he successfully hid it from the other party and escaped from Azkaban. Moreover, the Ministry of Magic is busy hunting down Sirius, so the Dementors probably won't care about the disappearance of a food that they can't taste. This time no trace is left, Dementors won't tell so early, the Ministry is already busy and they don't even come to prison to check on inmates, and unlike the previous time after fighting Dumbledore, this time no one has seen him escape, so for some time they will think he is still in Azkaban. It would probably be a long time before Dumbledore found out that he had left. He could completely hide, live in the United States or other countries, and study magic. As for the British affairs, he no longer had to get involved. I'm not in a weakened state. I even have power to transform into a magical animal. No one is chasing me this time. My eye shape and hair are different than before. Isn't it a true freedom? The resurrection and freedom that had been weighing on his heart before have been completely realized, and all the joy burst out at once. The Dementor that originally planned to escape seemed to have noticed this high-spirited mood. It found that the terrifying giant bird suddenly disappeared, and the person who appeared in this wilderness at this moment was exuding seductive happiness. It leaned down and rushed towards Cyrus without hesitation. When its body was close to Cyrus, the sudden drop in temperature gave Cyrus a wake-up call. Cyrus raised his head and raised his wand high towards the Dementor. "Oh? Weren't you cowering a moment ago?" Het expecto patronum. A huge silver bird flew out of his wand with bright lightning. The giant bird's claws penetrated the Dementor's body, and the silver lightning exploded in an instant, blasting the Dementor into ashes. After practicing Animagus, even his patron saint changed. The usual patron saint can only drive away the soul-eating monster, but when the silver Thunderbird released lightning, the soul-eating monster that even real thunder and lightning could not kill died. Seeing the black smoke falling like ashes, Cyrus felt a strong sense of pride in his heart. He succeeded in transforming into a magical animal that no one had succeeded in, and he also killed the unkillable Dementor. Is there anything else he can't do? The vast world is now at his feet. Chapter 97, from Riddle. Volume 2, starts. _________. The public is reminded that Blake is armed and extremely dangerous. A dedicated hotline has been set up and anyone who sees Blake is asked to report it immediately. The man's thin and haggard face on the TV was surrounded by long, dirty, messy, tangled hair. Compared with that man, Harry felt that he was quite neat. Sirius Black's Most Wanted TV show has been reporting for weeks. This story had been in the newspapers since the first day after returning to Privet Drive from Hogwarts this summer. His uncle, Vernon Dursley, always angrily wanted to know which prison the man had escaped from, so that he could make a phone call and complain to the warden of that prison. But today's news seems to be different. After the TV reported on Sirius Black again, it surprisingly did not jump to a boring program like agriculture and fisheries, but instead talked about another prison escapee. It is reported that another criminal, Riddle, is also currently missing from prison. According to relevant speculation, Black and Riddle are suspected accomplices, and both of them possess lethal weapons. Harry, who was frying eggs, was immediately stunned. Hearing the name Riddle again made him feel as if he had suddenly returned to the magical world from this quagmire-like Muggle world, but the emotion pouring out of his heart at this moment was not happiness, but surprise. Tom Riddle, he once thought that the other party was a friend, and he had been acting with the other party for almost half of the semester, but in reality, this was the man who killed his parents that night 12 years ago, and even wanted to kill him too. In the last school year, he also controlled a giant basilisk, wreaking terror attacks in Hogwarts and petrifying several people. Fortunately, Dumbledore, who everyone said was the greatest wizard, caught him and sent him to Azkaban, a prison specially prepared for wizards. Hearing the name Tom Riddle again, and the news that he had escaped from prison, Harry felt very confused for some reason. He didn't know how to face this. Logically speaking, he should be angry at the escape of the enemy who killed his parents, but in fact, he is not. On the contrary, he was a little happy for the other person. It was always difficult for him to overlap the shadows of Riddle, whom he had spent time with, and Voldemort, even though Dumbledore had repeatedly emphasized that what that man was best at was deceiving people. But how did Riddle get involved with a criminal from the Muggle world? Or is it just a coincidence of having the same name? He raised his head and secretly looked at the TV. The Dursley family had gotten a color TV a long time ago. On the TV, the handsome Tom Riddle was half smiling, with every strand of his hair neatly combed, and a small handful of slightly curly black hair hanging down from his forehead. It was indeed the Riddle that Harry knew. Harry had seen Riddle's appearance in the other person's memory before. Tom Riddle looked completely different from his accomplice Sirius. He was obviously wearing a prison uniform, but he didn't seem to be worried about himself at all. Hair and clothes are clean and looks well organized. He didn't look like a prisoner at all, but like he was about to serve in a prison. Perhaps he had expected this day when he was imprisoned? Harry didn't know, but at least one thing was clear to him: if Sirius Black was an accomplice of Tom Riddle, it meant that the prisoner who had escaped for several weeks was actually a wizard. Maybe this was a method to find wizard criminals in the Muggle world, so the people could call the hotline number if they happened to see the face? But no matter what, he guessed that he might be able to understand what happened tonight. His good friends Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger are not as closed-minded about the news about the wizarding world as he is, and the two of them have also spent a long time with Tom Riddle. If there was any news, Harry believed they would write to him. Not to mention, after 12 o'clock tonight, it will be his birthday. In the past 12 years, he had never looked forward to his birthday. Even last year, he had a very bad birthday. But this year, as long as another house elf didn't show up trying to save him, maybe he could get some letters from friends. Harry put the omelette, which was a little burnt on one side, on the plate, and then counted the clock and waited for the day to pass. Time passed hard at night, and then midnight arrived. He glanced expectantly out the window, but there was nothing outside. For a while, Harry thought he wouldn't hear from anyone on his birthday again. But an hour after he turned 13, against the backdrop of the golden moon, a large creature flew towards Harry with a strangely tilted body and flapping wings, getting bigger and bigger. Harry stood motionless, watching its descent. Then 3 more owls flew into his small room. Harry was very lucky that he moved from the storage room on the stairs to this small room last year, otherwise, he would never have imagined that he would receive so many letters in one night. Just now 4 owls, 2 of them from Ron and Hermione, who sent the other 2. Soon he knew where the 3rd owl came from, Hogwarts. This owl from the school brought 2 letters, one from his friend Rubeus Hagrid and the other from the school. And the 4th owl? Harry didn't recognize who it was from. The letter looked very plain, with no signature on it, and a badge printed on the seal with the image of a handsome eagle. He originally wanted to read the letter from Ron first, but this unsigned letter attracted him like magic, and his hand couldn't help but tear open the seal. If there was someone familiar with magic by his side, he might be immediately prevented from opening an unknown letter, lest he be cursed. But he never thought for a moment that such an accident would happen. He tore open the envelope and a greeting card fell out. The card showed a flying Quidditch star. It was the first card he'd ever received, and it was his favorite Quidditch. Harry couldn't help but feel a lot of joy in his heart, and now he was eager to know who knew him so well. Dear Harry. Happy birthday! I'm sure you're wondering who sent you this letter, Harry, and I'm guessing you've heard about Tom Riddle's escape. Yes, I am Riddle. Chapter 98, continued reading. This letter is from Tom Riddle. Harry only read the first few sentences and stood there blankly. He never dreamed that one day he would receive a letter from that person, and that person also sent him a greeting card with birthday wishes written on it. A blessing and a spell he had never heard of. For a moment, he didn't know whether to continue reading, but surprisingly, Harry felt no sadness or anger at all, but felt a little happy. Ever since he learned something about Tom Riddle, Harry found that his own experience was very similar to that person's. He should have been angered, disgusted, even horrified by the similarities. Because Voldemort was a terrible person, he killed many people, including his own parents. I have to live under someone else's roof now because of his gift. But in fact, he felt a sense of familiarity, he felt a little lucky. There was someone who was very similar to him, almost like a brother. The feeling was very wonderful, just like the Weasley twins he knew. They are always together and are always inseparable. Harry felt that he regarded Hogwarts as his home, which was the same for Mr. Riddle, and there was a strong resonance between them. Another reason that prevented Harry from hating Mr. Riddle was that Harry had met Voldemort at the end of his first year. Therefore, it was difficult for him to equate Voldemort with Mr. Riddle. The madman was very weak at the time, but still terrifying. He possessed Professor Quirrell and almost killed Harry. Fortunately, Harry had a protective spell left by his mother before she died, which made Voldemort unable to harm him. He or Quirrell's hand just touched him a little, and immediately disappeared into ashes. But this time, for the whole year, Harry had been in contact with Mr. Riddle many times, but the spell had never been triggered once. Perhaps the spell failed? But Harry preferred to think that Mr. Riddle never meant to harm him. In fact, he didn't truly hurt anyone. According to Hermione, the basilisk can actually kill everyone easily. Even if it can't, Mr. Riddle can do it himself. This is not difficult for him, but all those who were attacked were eventually rescued. Harry continued reading. Yes, I am Riddle. But actually I would rather you call me Cyrus, yeah, that's the name I have taken now. Whether it is Riddle or Voldemort, they are all in the past for me, not the present, and not the future. As for everything else is pretty much the same as what's said in the news. It was indeed Sirius Black who helped me leave Azkaban, but it's a bit far to say he was an accomplice. We just made a deal, with different purposes. On the contrary, it's you who will be in trouble again next semester. Harry was slightly embarrassed. He had been in constant trouble over the past 2 school years. He could already imagine the mocking expression on Mr. Riddle's face when he wrote these words. However, Harry was confused by the trouble mentioned by Mr. Riddle. He really didn't understand what else could be related to him. He continued reading, hoping to get some information from the rest of the letter. But Cyrus changed his words and talked about something else. I guess you are probably wondering now, why I am still writing to you now. In addition to the fact that it happens to be your birthday, I also want you to help me apologize to Ginny for betraying her trust. I had something else and I was also helpless. Harry noticed that the text on the letter seemed to pause here for a long time, and the ink was smeared on the letter paper. It seemed that Mr. Riddle had more words to explain, but he finally ended the topic and continued. Let me give you some advice, Harry. The professor of the divination course you and Ron chose this semester, Sybil Trelawney, is just an old delusional lady most of the time, but in fact she does have the gift of prophecy. If you can still trust me, and you happen to hear the prophecy coming from her mouth, if you don't mind, tell me about it, and as for how to tell me? It's simple, I will know as long as you write it in that diary. Please keep that I can read the diary a secret from Ginny. She has been writing a lot and I can't handle the bombardment of her messages, and it took me a while to calm down for a few days, so if she knows I can actually read that, she will start bombarding more. Seeing this, Harry suddenly laughed. That night, after confirming that there was no danger, Dumbledore left Riddle's diary to Ginny. Harry didn't expect that Mr. Riddle actually had a backup plan, even though Ginny persisted in writing many words in the diary without any response. The second suggestion is that there is a high probability that you will be able to use the spell behind the birthday greeting card I sent you with this letter. It is a good thing to learn it early. The third suggestion, or should be said to be a reminder, is more appropriate. Remember, sometimes things seem dangerous. The omen may be just the opposite, and if you spend time with things day and night, they will show their fangs. Your friend, Cyrus. P.S. I don't think you will tell Dumbledore what happened today, right? At this time, the letter in Harry's hand suddenly burned, and he was so frightened that he quickly threw it away. A small ball of flame burned the letter cleanly in the air before falling, leaving only the birthday greeting card, and he knew immediately that the letter was enchanted. Harry picked up the greeting card, and there was a spell written in a corner of the card that was full of blessings. Summons a powerful guardian to fend off dark creatures. Expecto Patronum. Note, you must recall happy bits of memories in your mind when casting the spell. Calling a powerful guardian. Harry had never heard of this spell, but he thought that since Mr. Riddle suggested that he needed it, he could at least remember the name first. Last year, Ginny excelled in many subjects because of the guidance of Mr. Riddle. Especially in charms, Harry dared to say that at least many 3rd and 4th year wizards were not necessarily Ginny's opponents. Harry held the greeting card in his hand and couldn't calm down for a long time. Reason told Harry that he should tell Dumbledore about all this. No one was wiser than Dumbledore. But something felt strange, and he felt there was nothing wrong with this. Mr. Riddle, no, it should be said that Mr. Cyrus and Voldemort may not be the same person at all. As he said in his letter, sometimes what seems to be a sign of danger may be exactly the opposite. He put the envelope away, wondering what Mr. Cyrus was doing at the moment. Would he know that both Ginny and Hermione were missing him? After the truth of the attack came out, no matter what Mrs. Weasley and Mr. Weasley said, Ginny believed that Mr. Riddle might not be a bad person. Even the petrified Hermione said that the man just wanted her to sleep for a while. He probably thought I was too smart and was a bit of a hindrance, and he even reminded me to use a spell to weaken the basilisk's magic, Hermione had said. Perhaps Ron was the only one who firmly believed that Mr. Cyrus was a formidable enemy. Ginny believed that Ron was just frightened by the Voldemort-related things, while Hermione believed that it was due to Ron's dissatisfaction with Mr. Cyrus' unwillingness to help him with his homework and exams. But in fact, Harry just felt that Ron was a little worried about his sister, so he was behaving like that about this matter. But even Ron didn't oppose Mr. Cyrus on everything. At least he felt that Mr. Cyrus had done a very good job of beating up Slytherins in the dueling club and wiping out the Acromantulas in the entire Forbidden Forest. It can be regarded as eliminating harm for the people. Chapter 99, The Shadow Behind Destiny. Germany, a country that has only been unified for a short time, seems to be a little chaotic. But for wizards, there is only one German magical world from beginning to end, and the wall that isolates muggles cannot isolate wizards. Gregorovitch got up very early. August would be his busiest month. Little wizards who had received letters of admission to Durmstrang Institute, one after another would come to his wand shop under the leadership of their parents to buy wands. He counts on this month for most of his business. But today seems a little different. When Gregorovitch opened the window, he saw a huge eagle passing in the sky. Its golden feathers were shining brightly in the morning light, and it looked very beautiful. But he was not happy at all. He was reminded of a man who had disappeared for a long time, Gellert Grindelwald. When the thief stole the Elder Wand from his hand, he squatted leisurely on the windowsill, looking like a big golden bird. I hope it won't be a bad day. He sighed. At this moment, the bird in the sky had disappeared. Grigovich retreated into the house. It was time for him to prepare for the opening. After taking care of everything, Grigovich opened the door, thinking about when he would welcome his first guest. However, to his surprise, his first guest was already in front of the door waiting patiently. Not a little wizard, but a young boy, very tall and handsome. Compared to wizards, the other party is dressed more like a muggle. Even though Grigovich doesn't understand the muggle dressing style very well, he has to admit that the other party's outfit looks very suitable, as if it were placed on a perfectly shaped mannequin, and the mannequin doll that served as the mold came to life and appeared in front of his shop. Of course, the most peculiar thing is the other party's hair color and eye color. The ends of the thick black hair are dyed gold, and the pupils are also golden as if they are inlaid with two golden ambers. Gregorovich had never seen the person in front of him, and he was sure that the person was not one of his previous clients. However, Cyrus's appearance still made him feel good, and he couldn't help but say in a friendly tone, "Come to buy a wand." Yeah, the wand from before was broken. The wizard appearing here at this moment is none other than Cyrus. In fact, his wand was not broken. Malfoy specially made him a wand that was very similar to the one Voldemort used before. It was made of yew wood, had phoenix tail feathers, and even the appearance of the wand was exactly the same. But the wand didn't work well for Cyrus. Wandology is a very deep knowledge. Even wands made from the same kind of materials will not be exactly the same. Even if they are taken from the same tree, the same magical animal, or they are like brothers, they may not be the same. It is to choose two wizards with completely opposite personalities. Moreover, the combination of yew wand and phoenix tail feathers may be suitable for Voldemort, but it may not be suitable for Cyrus because Voldemort's and Cyrus's personalities differ greatly. The conditions were limited before, but now that he is finally free, Cyrus naturally plans to get a brand new wand that suits him, preferably one that is powerful enough. Although he is now temporarily free from the threat of Dumbledore, Cyrus actually believes that his situation is not so optimistic. While in Azkaban, Cyrus took a few drops of Felix Felicis to give himself some confidence. As a result, he developed the unprecedented Animagus. He was very excited at the time. But when the effect of the elixir completely disappeared, he suddenly realized something was wrong. The elixir of blessing can indeed give people a little inspiration, but it is impossible to directly create such a powerful spell. The transformation of magus from fantastic beasts is a problem that has troubled wizards for thousands of years, and it is impossible to get the answers so easily. The voice that appeared in his mind at that time was still a bit weird now that he thought about it. If he hadn't been under the influence of Felix Felicis at the time, Cyrus would never have tried it rashly. An unknown voice, an invisible thought, he himself had used this method to deceive Ginny, only to lose his vigilance. Even if the results seem good now, who knows what impact this voice will have. But what scared him the most was that the spell that echoed in his mind countless times was immediately forgotten by him after he practiced magic. This is a bit too weird. You know, he was resurrected from the diary, but his abilities when he was in the Horcrux state did not disappear. It can be said that he himself is a living pensieve. All the memories, as long as he thinks about them, must be there. But at dawn when the storm came, Cyrus's memory about the spell was not so clear that he shuddered. He only remembered one spell, but when he tried to replay that memory in front of his eyes over and over again, the spell in his mind turned into a harsh noise as if it had been cast with magic to prevent eavesdropping. It's like a TV that can't receive a signal. There can only be two reasons for this result. The first is that he did not hear the spell and had no relevant memory, so the spell naturally did not exist. But obviously, he heard and tried it, so this possibility is not established. Another possibility is that someone has tampered with his memory, and it was without him noticing. But who could modify his memory without him noticing? Not even Dumbledore could have done this. Cyrus felt as if he had suddenly fallen into a huge net. Destiny seemed to be intertwining with something, and someone was standing behind the loom of fate to control everything. He felt very urgent and also longed for stronger power. No one wants to be a pawn that can be sacrificed at any time, even if the person standing behind it is fate itself. For this reason, Cyrus especially wrote to Harry, hoping that he could help pay attention to whether Professor Sybil Trelawney would leave any new prophecies. This old lady didn't leave many serious prophecies in her life, but two of them were related to Harry and Voldemort. Cyrus was born out of Voldemort, reborn like a snake that shed its skin, but he also had to admit that he did have a huge connection with Voldemort now. Maybe the new prophecy will also mention a bit of his destiny? But no matter what, it is impossible to fight against fate without enough strength. You must first make yourself stronger. Come in and take a look. It's still early. After a while, there might be many little wizards coming. Grigorovic slowly turned sideways and let Cyrus walk into the store. This wand shop is almost the same as Ollivander's was, and Grigorovic himself was much older than Ollivander. In fact, he was more than 10 years older than Dumbledore. Chapter 100, Is 79 galleons expensive? Planning to buy a new wand? Do you have any requirements, sir? Grigorovich took Cyrus to look around the store. The shelves were filled with items left by Grigorovich's ancestors. Many of the wands have accumulated dust, and the store always smells like time. I hope to get a powerful wand, Cyrus said as he looked up at Grigorovich's wand shop. There are probably tens of thousands of wands here, and the dense and tall shelves are filled with wand boxes that have been dusty for a long time. This makes the light in the store very weak, and the huge shadows make the temperature in the store a bit cold. But the environment inside is anything but bleak. Dust danced in the dry air. Everyone who comes here to buy a wand says so. Grigorovic smiled and said proudly, among the 3 most famous wand manufacturers in Europe, only the wands I make are the most powerful. But I have to say, others also have their own advantages. Some are looking for the most suitable, while others are pursuing the most stable. He took a box off the shelf without thinking too much. Elderberry, the nerve of the dragon, a combination of death and power, 12 inches, very powerful and proud, only the most talented wizards can subdue it. After Cyrus took the wand, he immediately felt its magic. He has not tried the power of the Elder Wand, but the wand in his hand is indeed the most powerful wand he has obtained in a while. He could feel the power of the wand and waved it slightly. Magic power immediately spurted out from the tip of the wand, and red sparks exploded. You control it very well. Every wizard who has tried this wand before has made a lot of noise, and they weren't able to make this wand surrender. Grigorovic said in amazement. This is indeed the most powerful wand I have ever encountered. Let this be it. Cyrus was very pleased with the wand. But after Grigorovich saw how easily he had subdued the wand matched with the dragon's nerves, he had other thoughts. Of course, I am not modest to say that I am the most outstanding wand maker in the history of the Grigorovich family. Grigorovich said with a smile, but I think maybe you can try another one first. The wand makes the decision. As he spoke, he cast a flying spell, and a delicate box flew quickly, knocking over many wand boxes, but Grigorovich didn't look distressed at all. After studying the Elder Wand, he tried many different combinations. For example, the Elder Wand's Elder and Thestral's tail feathers were completely reproduced. Unfortunately, this combination did not show the expected magic power. On the contrary, Grigorovich made several in a row, and they were all very mediocre. After that, he tried some new materials and gradually mastered some rules. Phoenix feathers and elderberry are also a good match, but the number of phoenixes is too rare. And there are a lot of uncertainties. Sometimes it makes for an extraordinary wand, and sometimes it seems ordinary. On the contrary, the dragon's nerves or the dragon's heartstrings are more compatible with the elder, and the two can often bring unexpected effects. As for other magical animals, he has also made many attempts, such as Thunderbird feathers. A wand made of this material is already very powerful, but it is more sensitive and uncontrollable than wands made of Thunderbird feathers and other materials. Until now, not many wizards had the ability to use that wand well. Cyrus also wanted to know what kind of good thing he was hiding. When Grigorovich opened the exquisite box, a very gorgeous wand appeared in front of Cyrus. It's also elderberry, and the core comes from a very strong and special Thunderbird. Cyrus was attracted to it the first time he saw it. It was about 12 1/3 inches, straight, with clear joints. The end looked like 2 gathered wings, and the body of the staff was engraved with patterns that looked like thunder and lightning. He couldn't help but reach for the wand, and its power immediately resonated with him. He seemed to see a pair of dark wings of death spread out in front of his eyes, and the wand sprayed out sparks. Grigorovich was so excited, as if some long-cherished wish had finally come true. This is my favorite work. It's been almost 100 years, and no one has been able to conquer it so far. Maybe Dumbledore can? But I guess he doesn't need it anymore. I thought I would never find a suitable wizard in my life. I also thought that maybe my children and grandchildren would have the opportunity to meet an outstanding wizard of the new generation. Unexpectedly today, yes, today is the lucky day. Grigorovich took a deep breath, and his chest seemed to explode. His eyes, which were already a little cloudy, seemed to be moist. He looked at Cyrus seriously and grabbed his shoulders with both hands. Boy, you will achieve a great career. Cyrus was non-committal. With his talent, whether he wants to achieve something has never depended on whether he can, but on whether he is willing to do it. If you can, studying magic alone is also very interesting. But for Cyrus, the crisis in his heart has not been completely resolved. Just this wand. Thank you very much, 79 galleons. 79. Cyrus' hand holding the galleons suddenly froze. Isn't it too expensive? Expensive? Where is it expensive? It has been this price for so many years. Don't talk nonsense with your eyes open. It is difficult to make a brand of wands. Sometimes you have to look for your own reasons. After so many years, hasn't the salary increased? Yes. But the wand is still the same price. How is it expensive? Looking at the arrogant Grigorovich, Cyrus resisted the urge to hit him with a death curse and said through gritted teeth. As far as I know, a wand from Ollivanders' wand shop only costs 7 galleons. When it came to price, Grigorovich immediately changed his face. This is a preferential price for young wizards who have just entered school. Ollivanders has reached an agreement with Hogwarts, and the school will pay the extra money. The new students at here will come to me to buy wands. But they are all purebloods and not many are short on money, sir. Moreover, this wand is very special, Grigorovich said with a sigh. I know you came to Germany specifically to buy a wand, and you must have heard some rumors about me. I have never responded directly before. Yes, but now I can tell you, yes, those rumors are true. Grigorovich paused and looked at Cyrus seriously and solemnly as if expecting to see a surprised expression on his face. But what disappointed him was that Cyrus was very calm from beginning to end, as if the legend about the Elder Wand was far less surprising to him than the 79 galleons. But Grigorovich had no choice but to continue. In the time since I got the Elder Wand and lost it, I have been working hard to figure out the secret of the Elder Wand's power, which is why the wands I've made since then have always been more powerful than any other wand. This wand is the most powerful of all imitations. Although its power is still very different from the Elder Wand, I think that among all existing wands, there are few that can match the power on it. Especially since I lost the Wand of Destiny, and I've never made such a powerful wand again. All right. Although Cyrus felt that 79 galleons was indeed expensive, considering that the power of this wand with Thunderbird feathers was indeed amazing, unlike a certain eyebrow pencil brand that could be replaced at any time, he decided to buy this magic wand. Fortunately, I asked for some money from Malfoy before I came to Germany, otherwise, I really wouldn't be able to give it. Grigorovich took a large bag full of galleons, weighed it a few times, and his old face immediately beamed. You will achieve great things, kid. Maybe. Cyrus put the wand in his sleeve, opened the door, and left Grigorovich's wand shop. At this time, the flow of people in this town began to increase, and adult wizards held hands with exquisitely dressed children to buy things they needed for school. Not far from the wand shop are several shops selling robes, and further ahead is a pet shop. It looks no different from Diagon Alley. He sideways squeezed out of the crowd, intending to walk into a remote alley and cast Animagus to leave. Having already obtained the wand, there was nothing worth stopping for in this place. Of course, he believed that there might be some ancient legends here, but Cyrus didn't know much about them. Instead of looking for these illusory things, it would be better to get what he already knew. For example, Deathly Hallows.
Thanks for listening.